Morning, everyone. My name's Simon Johnson. I'm the Democratic Services Officer. A lot of you will recognise my name from the issue of notice of meeting. I'll be acting as clerk for the meeting today as well. If I could just ask that while we go through procedure, if everyone could remain muted, just so we can get the committee established, and then I'll hand over to the elected chair and we'll start. So if we have, I can't see any further issues. Okay, then we'll start. On the published agenda, item 1, apologies. None have been received, so the committee members are as published in the agenda. We'll move straight to item 2. May I have, which is election of the chairman. May I have nominations, please? Is that Councillor Lees? Councillor, you're muted, Councillor Lees.
I nominate Councillor Andrew Statham, please.
Okay, does that have a second?
Yes, please, Chair.
Councillor Mark Wakeman, thank you. So any further nominations at all? No? Okay, then I declare that Councillor Andrew Statham is elected chair of this committee, and I hand over control. Thank you, Councillor.
Very good. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Derbyshire Dales Licensing Appeals Subcommittee hearing. My name's Andrew Statham, and I'll be chair of today's proceedings. On the subcommittee today are Councillor Stuart Lees and Councillor Mark Wakeman. Lee Gardner is our Legal Services Manager, who will be the committee's advisor. The clerk today is Simon Johnson. Would the licensing manager please introduce herself?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Eileen Tierney. I'm the District Council's Licensing Manager.
Very good.
Thank you, Chair.
Would the applicants please introduce themselves and any representatives they may have?
Good morning, Chair. My name's Rob Edge, Licence Leader, the agent on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Would those making representatives please introduce themselves and any representatives they may have?
Chair, I'll just interrupt on that. I think if we go through 30 odd people, if we could go
I'm getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, the representatives, what we'll do with the representatives is just take a block of 5 at a time, and then we'll be able to ask questions of them representatives. So could Matthew Taylor, please, Councillor Matthew Taylor.
Chair, just before you start, and we start with the first person, may I just have a couple of minutes to explain to everyone how this is going to run and what we need to do. Morning, everyone. As I say, my name's Lee Gardner. I'm the Legal Services Manager, and I'll be advising this committee. Under general case law for a hearing, we have to give the same amount of time to both parties as a block. We have, under our procedure rules in our constitution, we allow 3 minutes for those speaking against. If it was a small committee where there was only a small number of objectors, we mostly wouldn't have put a strict time limit on, but with 32 people wishing to speak, we have to try and limit this to make this a manageable committee. So we have 32 people wishing to speak against, of which 2 are ward councillors, which under our procedures, they're allowed 5 minutes each. So that gives a total of 1 hour, 40 minutes to hear objections relate to that. Therefore, we have to give 1 hour and 40 minutes to the applicant to be able to respond to everything that he has heard. In order to make this manageable, as Chair has mentioned, we'll take 5 objectors at a time and then allow all parties to ask questions of those objectors. Of course, when it comes to the time given to, after the applicant has finished speaking, then any of the objectors would be entitled to ask questions of Mr. Edge or any of the licensing officers. I'd also like to say that for a small period of time, we have Laura Salmon here, who's the environmental officer. She's here to assist in any issues relating to the noise management plan, but she's not here to raise any objections or speak for or against the application. So, Chair, we will be timing the all speakers, including the applicant, to his 1 hour 40 minutes. So, Chair, if you would like to, I'll mute myself, but can I just check with the committee clerk who's timing the speakers?
Simon?
You're on mute, Simon.
Yeah, that's okay. I was aware that you were doing that yourself, Lee, but I mean, I can.
That's fine. Just didn't want to. I just wanted to make sure that there weren't two of us doing it.
No, there is just one thing, Lee, as well. Just before we do go to asking the representations, we just need to declare procedural matters that the committee is quorate and holding the meeting in public before we go to Eileen.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
So, Chair, it's up to Eileen to present a report before we go to objectives.
Very good. Firstly, we'll deal with preliminary matters. Is there any declarations of interest from the committee members? No.
No, Chair.
No, Chair. I can confirm that the committee is quorate. Does anybody present have objections to the hearing being held in public? We're ready to begin. Would Eileen please outline the application? You're muted, Eileen. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I just need to clarify a point on the first page of my report referring to wards affected. It's about halfway down page 3 of your bundle. My report states the wards affected would be Edleston and Wyerston. And the reason for this is that the premises, or the site, we'll call it the premises, to be licensed is located in that particular ward, and that's the normal procedure for these reports. However, several people making representations from nearby towns and villages, or villages and parishes, have asked that the committee notes that other wards should also be included as affected, namely Clifton and Bradley, Norbury, Doveridge and Parwich. There will be representations from people living in those wards in your bundle. There was no intention to imply that the impact of the application might be of lesser significance to these residents, just because the wards were not stated in my report. So, Chair, to the report, to the application. The application you have before you is for a premises licence to allow dance music festivals with the sale of alcohol at Darley-Moor Racing Club, Darley-Moor on the outskirts of Ashbourne. The application has been made under Section 17 of the Licensing Act and has been applied for by Euphoria Festivals Limited. The application is to allow up to 5 one-day events per year. The licensable activities applied for are the provision of live and recorded music and the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises only between the hours of 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. The application was made on the 19th of April 2021. During the following 28-day period, the applicant's representative, Mr. Edge, confirmed that the 3 days, as detailed in the application form, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and in the advert notice, were actually alternative days that the events were planned to take place on. So it would be either or, not for each event to take place over a 3-day period. The application was advertised by Mr. Edge at the site for 28-day period required and in a local paper within 10 days of the application being submitted to the licensing authority. This legal requirement affords local residents and businesses the opportunity to comment on applications for licenses. The application was also advertised by the Council's licensing team on the Council's website. All members of the District Council were also notified by email, as they are of any new applications received for premises licence across the whole of the district. At the same time, the application was served on the District Council. It was also served on the responsible authorities, and the responsible authorities are listed on page 5 of your paperwork. In paragraph 1.10.1, you'll see who the responsible authorities are and what their response to the application was during that time. You'll note that Derbyshire Police Authority considered that the measures proposed by the applicant in order to ensure these events could be run safely and without compromising the licensing objectives were not considered sufficient, so the police agreed some further measures with them. Those further measures are detailed in Appendix 2 of the report, starting on page 28 of your papers. Other measures that the applicant proposed in section M of the application on pages 23 and 24 of your papers could be translated into licence conditions also if the committee is minded to grant the application. During the 28-day consultation period, you'll see from my report that I received 96 representations from what are known as other persons defined in the legislation, and they're basically interested parties. These 96 representations were objecting to the licence application. So you'll have read these, Chair, in Appendix 3 of the report, starting on page, I believe, 33 of your papers. The main concerns are noise related and public safety, but as you'll be hearing from some of the people who have objected, I'll let them explain their concerns in more detail. As part of the application, the applicant provided the council with a draft event safety management plan. Now, this is a work in progress, and as it says in my report, it covers most aspects of safety that you would expect a festival, whether it's a 1-day, 2-day or 3-day, to cover. Generally, it is a work in progress, and throughout the period, if a licence were to be granted, then the responsible authorities and other authorities would work with the applicant on the finer detail of these plans that they've submitted as drafts. In most circumstances, when a festival is applied for, we do advise the applicant to contact Derbyshire County Council's emergency planning team. The emergency planning team controls large events, large event management, and basically they would arrange what they call a DSAG, which is a Derbyshire Event Safety Advisory Group meeting, made up of responsible authorities plus other statutory agencies that aren't defined as responsible authorities in the Licensing Act, such as ambulance service and highways, and normally they would invite the applicant along and discuss the proposals long before an application for a licence was actually submitted, so that they could advise them accordingly. Now, having spoken to the emergency planning manager at Derbyshire County Council, this event didn't meet the criteria for a Derbyshire Event Safety Advisory Group, and basically the reason it didn't, they have a risk assessment matrix, it didn't meet the criteria, and that's basically because the event isn't going to be overnight. There's no camping involved, so fire risk assessments and such like are of a lesser need, I suppose, than if it was, say, like the Why Not Festival. The capacity also has some significance on whether or not a DSAG is required. So that's why it hasn't gone to an event safety management group. I mean, if a licence were to be granted in whatever form, then the district council itself would organise a meeting of our officers, as in environmental health licensing, the health and safety aspect of environmental health, as well as noise, and possibly the police, to assist the applicant in ensuring that even if it's a 1-day event and a small capacity event, it should, the event safety management plans produced do need to be fit for purpose. So that's where we are with the application. I mean, obviously, under not normal circumstances, but under circumstances where I receive a limited number of representations opposing an application, it's usually or sometimes possible within the following 20 working day period before a hearing to negotiate some resolution, for want of a better word. Obviously, with the number of objections and the type of objections that we've received, that wouldn't have been possible to please everybody. So basically, that's why the application has been referred to the hearing for the committee to determine it, Chair. That's my report, as I see it.
Thank you, Eileen. Members of the committee, any questions for Eileen? Any clarification?
No, thank you, Chair.
Is there any clarification needed from any of the objectors from the licensing manager? So if you want to put your hand up.
Mr. Chair, my name's Simon Gillis from Hales Green. I'd just like to point out on the points raised about the affected wards, you did not stipulate Yeaveley and Rosley, which includes Hales Green. And being a resident who lives 300 yards away from the event within that ward, I think we're truly acceptable to include that within the scope of this meeting.
Okay, yeah, very good. Thank you. Any questions for the licensing manager from the applicant?
No, nothing from me. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. We'll now hear evidence from all parties. May I remind everybody that members of the committee have already read the papers in advance of the hearing. The committee will follow hearing procedures set out in Appendix 5 to the agenda. Has everybody been supplied with a copy of the hearing procedure? Yeah. The committee will hear evidence from the speakers, the objectors now. As the leader representative said, we'll take you in blocks of 5 and then question after that. So first up is Councillor Matthew Taylor. Are you there, Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Is it a procedural request that I go first, or could I ask that I follow Mr. John Edwards, because the parish council's representation here is pertinent to what Mr. Edwards has to say.
Mr. John Edwards, I'm just looking for Mr. John. I'll let that go. I'm just looking for Mr. John Edwards on my list.
Chair, if I may, Mr. Jonathan Edwards, he is in alphabetical order further down the list. If it's at your discretion, you're happy with that, then fine.
Yes, I still can't find him. Very good. Mr. Andrew Cross, is that the same one? Mr. Andrew Cross?
Oh yes, I wasn't intending to make a representation. I'm here to listen and observe and ask questions, if that's okay.
Okay. Professor Anthony Higgins.
Hi, I was here as a second for Dave Walsh from Rodsley Parish Council, so Dave should really take the lead on this, if that's all right.
Chair, I'm happy to do that.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. If you'd like to go, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. So committee, you will hear the representatives from other parish councils duly, and the individual objectors who provide evidence and detail of the major disquiet felt by residents regarding noise levels. For Yeaveley and Rodsley, which includes those residents living in the hamlet of Hales Green, which is extremely close, as you've heard, to the site, noise levels affecting the local residents are also of particular and indeed prime concern to their quality of life. It appears that decisions regarding actions to be taken over excessive noise levels will be made by the licensee or their representative in some form of self-regulation. And we're wondering how this can be acceptable, and at what point in reality will action be taken by licensing authorities should that, as we expect it will be, become a problem on the day. Additionally, there are planned to be up to 5 events each year, as we've heard. And indeed, there are plans to consider more and all those of greater duration, seen in certain plans, documentation. Regardless, it is likely that they will all be in the summer months, so it's somewhat of a disingenuous to say there are 5 per year when we really mean that there could be 1 over 5 months of period. This is a far greater frequency than the application might lead one to believe. Further, these will be held at a time when residents have a reasonable right to quality of life to be outdoors, and this will be adversely affected by the noise. While we are being told this is a licensing application and not a planning application, it is clear from our residents, the applicant, as our residents have said, the applicant is trying to leverage this application and circumvent planning queries, as this is clearly on the understanding of Darley-Moor being fundamentally a motorcycle racetrack with occasional usage for other purposes that does not create a noise nuisance. The point being that we already have to incur a noise nuisance. This is during daylight hours. As stated, the dance festival is to conclude at 11 p.m, but we can reasonably assume that there will be certain noise levels for 2 to 3 hours afterwards as 5,000 people depart. This is clearly well beyond a typical day and the intended use of the facility. Okay. We're also concerned as to the point made by the applicant about the control of drugs and drink on the site. It seems to me that for those some of those will be objected if they're intoxicated under the influence of illegal substances. But whilst this may be a satisfactory measure for the applicant, we feel it will be the end of their problem, but the start of our problems, or start of another set of problems for local residents, given the fact that they may be evicted for 11 hours before they are picked up, let's say, by one of those attending, or indeed these buses. Okay. Have I got my 3 minutes yet?
Simon, have you been timing, Simon? Very good. Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Andrew Shirley. Do you want to speak now, Andrew?
Yes, I will do. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Shirley, just to confirm, you've got 5 minutes as a ward councillor.
Yes, you'll be pleased to know I won't take all that time. The three things I really want to talk about: traffic, antisocial behaviour, and noise. Traffic is going to be an issue, particularly at the end of the event. Darley Moor is a fairly isolated block of land. It doesn't have public transport connection, so people have to be bussed in and bussed out, or indeed come by a private car. There will be significant impacts, perhaps, particularly on the Woodlands Caravan Park, which is just opposite the entrance, with exiting traffic, and I think this could be an issue. As far as antisocial behaviour is concerned, it would seem that this is going to be pushed onto the licensees of the individual bars. I think this is probably inadequate, and the implications for antisocial behaviour need to be carried by the operator of the whole event. They do have the ability to eject people from the site, and again, I would question if you eject people on the site, they will just walk onto the A515, so they have to actually be taken somewhere. So there needs to be much better management of antisocial behaviour. If I look now at noise, which I think will be covered in a lot of detail by other people, but I think it is dealt with inadequately in the noise management strategy. The areas are described as a plateau surrounded by arable fields, but they neglect really to deal with the impact on Edleston and Wyerston and the various scattered houses around those settlements. We've already heard that it doesn't address Hales Green either. The report fails to identify sound travel with the prevailing wind, particularly to the village of Snelston. But there are also representations from those that live in Thorpe as well. So sound travel in the wind is going to be significant. Impacts of most of the sound can be actually researched quite well by a quick look at how the motorcycle track events are organised and the problems that they generate. That's all fairly well documented, and I would have expected that to have been picked up by the organisation that actually undertook the noise management strategy. Yes, music is different from motorcycle noise, but actually the way noise travels in the wind is remarkably similar. And I think if you also turn and take note of John Edwards's representations, which he'll speak on later, I think this adequately and fully addresses the problem in a way that the noise management strategy doesn't. It is the cumulative impact, and that is why you've got 93 objectors and 30 people wanting to speak today. There have been problems consistently with the operation of the motor track facility. And actually all this does is adds more problems, and it's the cumulative impact that will mean that people in the villages and in the properties surrounding the Darley Moor site, they won't have a single weekend when they are free from noise to enjoy their gardens and to enjoy their houses. It is pervasive, constant noise, and this application makes it worse. And I would have expected that to have been picked up in the application rather than actually ignored, which it has been. And that's why I asked for the application to be turned down and the license not granted. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. Next, Mrs. R.B. Alton. Hello? No, you're not there, Mrs. Alton?
Yes, I'm here. Hello. I've just got a very brief statement because other members of the village are going to be speaking. I just wanted to say, as the chair of Snelston Parish meeting, I would like to say on behalf of the residents that we strongly object to this licence being granted. This is due to the cumulative nuisance that the increased amount of noise coming from Darley Moor racetrack would have on the general health and mental well-being of our community. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Miss Alton. Next up, Mr. John Bailey. Are you there, John?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just unmuting myself. Do you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would very much like to agree with David Walsh, Andrew Shirley and Ray Alton as well, relating to the points they've made. And the one thing I would particularly like to stress is not noise and everything else has been researched and all those sorts of things are quite clear. But it is what I call cumulative creep. And that means cumulative nuisance, how things progress. At the moment here, I suffer from motorcycle noise when the wind's in the right direction. It's absolutely, totally obnoxious. I suffer from aeroplanes, little microlights buzzing around my house every Saturday and Sunday, and sometimes in the week as well. And these things have all come from this overall Darley site one way or another. Now, Rob Edge's rather late presentation is very professional, etc., and says everything's going to be absolutely wonderful when managed from within. But those of us who are on the outside, who are suffering things, as David and Andrew have said, at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday or 1 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, or the detritus which the Derbyshire Dales District Council will need to clear up in the town the following day and things like that, those are not covered in the very professional presentation. Trust me, if you ever go to a festival, have been on the outside of one or in other areas relating to such things, you will see all of these things happen. And I don't think that our little very well run Derbyshire Dales District Council has the spare money or the ability to cope with the extra wear and tear that will be put on the area. There are plenty of other places where this project could go to, and I don't think it needs to be at Darley Moor. Thank you all very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. That's the first 5 speakers. Any members of the committee have any questions they'd like to ask of the speakers? No.
None from myself, Chair.
Very good. Arlene, any comments on anything that's being raised by speakers?
No, Chair. Apologies to Mr. Gillis. I didn't realise Hales Green fell under Rodsley and Evely.
Very good. Have you got any comments, Lee?
No, Chair, I haven't got any comments. I don't know if Mr. Edge has any questions specifically of those representatives.
I didn't have any questions. I just wondered, having heard the first 5, Chair, whether it would be beneficial if we have Mr. Simon Joins from Joins and Nash, who's our noise management consultant, whether it would, at the Chair's discretion, obviously, be beneficial for him to step in now and explain how the noise management plan and strategy will work and how it will work in our continued dialogue with environmental health should the licence be granted.
Mr. Jones is on my list, but we'll hear from the objectors first and then we'll come back and listen to the applicant and your witnesses.
I think that's the best thing, Chair, because of course some further issues might be raised, which then that gentleman can comment and address everything at the same time.
Mr.
Also,
Chair,
then we start to lose, with so many people, we will start to lose track of who's speaking when and where. So, Chair, I would agree that's the best way forward.
Okay, certainly. I would just like to point out that Mr. Joins needs to leave for another meeting at 12 o'clock, but I think given the time frames you've set, we'll certainly should have enough time for him to do his bit. Thank you, Chair.
Could I respond to that, please, on the chair, Simon Gillis here? I'd like to back up the chair's decision to not have the technical expert speak at this time and wait for all questions to be raised by the objectors. I don't think, or I certainly can't imagine that there is anybody with any technical acumen on this call. So I don't think that feedback will be potentially any beneficial at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next batch of speakers. Mr. Nicholas Boyle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, my name's Nick Boiler. I've lived in Wyaston for over 30 years. And I'd just like to ask the committee to look at this proposal in terms of one specific unit of time, which is the weekend. I think for most of us around here, weekends are especially important in the summer. It's a time when we can stop work and relax. We spend time in the garden. People come for lunch. Weddings and other church services take place. Friends and family come to stay. And for all these activities, what we need, in fact, is a quiet weekend without the risk of unwanted background noise putting a blight on our activities. So how do we find a quiet weekend? Looking at the calendar, we see that the 6 months from April to September include 26 weekends, but 14 or more of these could include noisy bike-related activities. So we have a real problem here. Over half our summer weekends might already be affected. And we're now faced with a new threat, which is the possible allocation of up to 5 of our few remaining quiet weekends to an activity, which, if it happens, will certainly be a nuisance. We've had several conversations with the council about what constitutes a noise nuisance. It's not just a matter of loudness, we're agreed on that. It's also the duration of the noise and its frequency. The more often a noise happens, the longer it goes on, the less tolerable it becomes. On these criteria, the bikes are already a nuisance, sometimes a serious one. But what we have here looks like a super nuisance. With a maximum duration of 12 hours rather than 8, and a volume at least as high as the bikes, it would be hard, I think, to devise a source of noise nuisance more extreme than this. And who chooses the dates for all this activity? Not us as residents. Certainly, we're being offered no choice of dates. We just have to make do with what's left, which isn't very much. In fact, with the way things are going, as Councillor Shirley has pointed out, before long, we could finish up with nothing, no quiet weekends at all. I think we shouldn't allow this to happen. And I hope the committee will see it this way too, and will turn the proposal down. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Mr. Michael Bone. Mr. Michael Bone. Sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to very much echo the words of the last speaker. I live in Wyaston as well. First of all, I'd just like to say that putting a notice on the site at Darley Moor is not exactly going to, not many people are going to see that. Not too many people read the Ashbourne paper. And therefore, I would venture to suggest that a lot more than 100 objections you would have received if more people within these villages had known about the proposal, and you'd be having more than 30 people object to it today. Where I live, it's very close to the Darley Moor track. Noise is my main concern. And as the previous speaker just said, it takes up so many weekends, and this is going to be on top of that. We have the motorbike racing. We have small planes going overhead, microlights. We have shooting at Yeovely. When I moved to Wyerston, I accepted that the motorbike racing was taking place, but to be honest, I had no idea of the other noise nuisances in the area. And this 5 days, and as a previous speaker has said, probably more than 5 days eventually, because these things always get moved, will create an unbearable nuisance for the villages of Wyerston and the surrounding other villages. I'd also like to bring to the attention of the committee that the applicant, Euphoria Festivals Limited, I have made some inquiries of Companies House regarding Euphoria Festivals Limited. This is a new company, only formed in February this year. They have, as far as I can see, no track record of running a festival. The director, Mr. Beresford, is shown as an address in London. He has no other directorships as far as I can see. So if, as I suspect, if this is allowed, considerable problems will ensue. These problems will become the responsibility of the Derbyshire Dales Council, because Euphoria Festivals probably won't exist very long, and therefore, the event of the problems, the council will have to pick up the pieces. So that's my objection, strong objection to this application. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Mrs. Christine Bradwell, you're next.
Hello, yes. As I say, my name's Christine Bradwell. I live in Edliston, just one field away from the site. I actually reinforce everything that everybody has already said. I agree with all the points that have so far been made. My main concern is really, as other people have said, the cumulative effect of noise with the airfield, the motocross, the racetrack, the shooting at Yeovely, etc. It is multiple weekends of the spring, summer and autumn when we are collectively wishing to use our outside space and the surrounding areas. The public footpaths that go across these sites are extremely well used by the local communities. And I think that this removal of access is also an issue that other people perhaps have not yet brought to point. In terms of the noise impact itself, that and the safety of the event are my two major concerns. What I would say is that I am quite surprised that an application of this nature has been put into the council so late in the day. And I would be interested to know why that was the case. However, the point was just being made that perhaps the company wasn't in place, may have timed that, but the events were being advertised last summer. So I'm a little confused about that. Perhaps that's a question I would like to ask. In terms of the impact on the local community, the cumulative noise effect of all of these things, the controls that are already in place for the racetrack, I personally have not had any issues with in the past. I have never, ever raised an objection to anything in my life. This is the first time. And I think that shows you the weight of feeling that there is in the local area. We would respectfully ask that this application is turned down and that this licence is not granted at all. Even one event like this adds to the current noise restrictions. The current noise restrictions are there for a reason in terms of the number of occasions, the duration, the intensity of the noise, and also that frequency. In my opinion, granting of this licence in any form.
Hi, Miss Bradwell, can you quickly sum up now?
Granting of this licence in any form increases levels of noise nuisance, and I believe it would act in direct contradiction to the existing noise restrictions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Mark Bright. Sorry. Mr. Mark Bright.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Bright. My wife and I run the business of Woodland Caravan Park, which is directly opposite Darley Moor Racetrack and within 200 metres of the main arena. We've been established since 2007 and became adults only in 2015. We are now one of the Peak District's premier parks, and in 2020 was nominated by our customers as one of the top 100 parks in the UK. Our reviews are continuously 4 or 5 star. We have 50 pitches for caravans and motorhomes, and our demographic age group is over 50 years of age. Our season is 32 weeks long, approximately the same as the Racetrack Diary. Most weekends we have between 75 and 100 guests on the park at any one time, who could easily spend in excess of £100 per person per visit in local cafes, tea rooms, pubs, restaurants and tourist attractions. That's between £7,500 and £10,000 each weekend into the local Derbyshire Dales economy. Race and track days finish at 5 p.m, allowing for peaceful evenings. The spreadsheet that I sent to the committee shows 20 of our weekends are already affected by noise, which include a Friday or a Monday track day. This puts our customers off from booking long weekends. Add to that another 5 one-day events, which are proposed to end at 11 p.m, but in reality, exit noise will continue until the early hours. So that's now 25 weekends out of 32, equating to over 3/4 of our season's weekends lost to noise. Our bookings over the summer weekends generate thousands of pounds, and to date, proposed weekend at the 21st of August, we have 24 bookings with a revenue in excess of £2,000, with the potential of losing even more bookings. This revenue supports 2 self-employed people and associated suppliers. The music events will also have a huge environmental impact on the natural habitat, birds and wildlife that we have worked so hard to protect. This application will devastate this business. We now request the committee takes the opportunity to study the noise data report provided by John Edwards, consider the objections raised by our customers and 96 objections raised by local residents, and decline this application. If these music events go ahead, we will appeal the decision and seek financial compensation through the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bright. Mr. Jonathan Edwards, you're up next.
Okay, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Edwards. I live at Wyerston. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but also I'm a witness from Mr. Steve Ratcliffe, who lives at the nearest property to the racetrack, and this is my submission. You'll be aware that my previous letter, that I'm qualified in noise monitoring and environmental assessments, and I've been conducting noise monitoring on Darley Moor Racetrack site surrounding the area on a very regular basis since 2013. I also work in other locations other than Ashbourne with regard to noise monitoring and assessments, I also work in the field of examining noise management plans submitted by acoustic consultants. On this document, with regard to noise management plan, the most significant noise sensitive locations were disregarded by Joins Nash in the noise management document I received on the 27th of May. These locations are the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Steve Ratcliffe at Darley House and the Woodland Caravan site of Mr. Mark and Janice Bright. On the 8th of June, during a telephone call with the licensing officer, I was informed of the submission of a revised noise strategy document, which I then received a copy of. The revised document shows the distance from the main stage to the added house, being Mr. and Mrs. Ratcliffe's house, as 426 metres from the main stage and just 236 metres from the second stage. This revised document shows a barrier attenuation of 10 decibels to the Darley House location. And I understand the increased attenuation at this location is due to an outbuilding at the property. It is clear that the predictions it makes are completely false and without merit. It also shows that the second stage is 230 metres from the property, which is correct as the distance, but the distance correction of 71 decibels. This claim, Mr. Chairman, is false. The correct distance correction is 76.6 decibels. And also it would be hard to explain this as an error. Darley House is a 3-storey property and the occupants have a clear line of sight to the main stage area from their first floor. The next issue I want to discuss, Mr. Chairman, is the orientation correction at Windmill Lane, which has a value of 8 decibel reduction from the main stage. This is far too ambitious. With regard to the Woodland Caravan Park, this again has been disregarded by the application. The distance attenuation from the main stage is 74 decibels, since it's only 380 metres from the main stage. There are no buildings to consider regarding reduced attenuation. The only attenuation is a small amount of ground attenuation and leaves on the trees. And also you have to add 3 decibels, should be added for both stages running at the same time. The properties of Mr. and Mrs. Ratcliffe and Mr. and Mrs. Bright are at locations which would be unlikely to receive any benefit from any orientation correction. There are also 11 further properties disregarded by Joins Nash at Edliston. To disregard the existence of properties during this application should not be acceptable to anybody, including the District Council. I'd also like to say that the fact that the application has now accepted one of the Windmill Lane locations as a noise sensitive location, but submitted false data on the decibel prediction level to support the application is truly shocking. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Councillor Matthew Taylor, did you want to come in after Mr. Edwards spoke?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, do I have 3 or 5 minutes?
3 minutes.
Right, I'll crack on. Thank you very much. I'll read my statement and be as succinct as I can. The principal issue is a public nuisance with respect to noise, but also the other licensing objectives with regards to the negative impact on the nearby residential and business communities, and that no value will be added by the granting of this license. We note that the Licensing Act is narrow in its scope, and it and the Derbyshire Dales policy are written principally with pubs and similar venues in mind. Therefore, the wider issues associated with events of this nature, such as the needs case and assessment of benefits versus impacts that would normally be dealt with in a planning application, need to be considered within the confines of the Licensing Act. As a note, the last planning application for additional loud motorbike events at Darley Moor was turned down at appeal on the grounds of public nuisance and undue disturbance to local communities. The inspector also commented that the Darley Moor site is at its full capacity for noisy activity. Thirdly, there will be cumulative noise, as we've heard today, and we would ask this to be considered within the Licensing Act and request that that is noted. Further, We also understand that the Licensing Act and Derbyshire Dales District Council licensing policy does cover the potential for licensed premises to impact the surrounding area. We request that off-site impacts are considered in the assessment of this licence application. The Parish Council recognises the importance of the Section 182 guidelines and that all representations should relate to the likely effect of the grant. The Parish Council is concerned that the commitment made within the licence application regarding the prevention of public nuisance does not clearly demonstrate how the prevention of public nuisance, in this case noise, will be achieved. The described steps within that application to prevent public nuisance simply say that noise monitoring and recording will take place. This is not prevention. With no meaningful and enforceable description for the prevention of public nuisance, the effect on the local community will be considerable. In contrast, the upholding of the other three licensing objectives within the confines of the event are clear and unambiguous in how those objectives will be met. And this was agreed between the applicant and the police licensing officer during the consultation process. To be effective and applicable, the noise management plan must be specific about allowable noise levels at relevant, mutually agreed receptor sites and rigidly adhered to, regardless of circumstances. As shown, this will not be possible for the licence application, and therefore the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective will not be met. Given the fundamental incompatibility between the objectives and the organisers and the concerns of affected residents, leaving mediation and agreement to after the licence, if it is granted, is too late and public nuisance will be inevitable. We understand that a number of objectors to this application received by Derbyshire Dales is unprecedented. We hope that this, combined with representations from the relevant parish and ward councillors, as well as our constituency MP, are seen as an indication of the level concerned in the affected communities and are given due weight in the assessment of this licence application. Fundamentally, this is not a viable site for the proposed events and would have a permanent and significant detrimental impact on the quality of life and living amenity of the surrounding communities. Importantly, the likely effect of the granting of the licence will be that the event organisers will be unable to fully uphold the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective in this case. We do note, and this is my final point, we do note that this is unusual for licence applications to be refused outright, but in this case, we urge the committee to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any questions from the members of the committee for any of the speakers?
None from
yes, please, Andrew.
Yes, Councillor Lakeman.
Have we got a year that the racetrack opened? What year did the racetrack open? I know it's not nothing to do with the licensing, but what year did it actually open? Do we know?
I believe it was 1965.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I believe planning consent was agreed in 1996. Before that, I was working on a temporary order.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I'll just add to that the following planning application for further noisy events was in, I can't give an exact date, but it was early in this century, so in the 2000s, and that was turned down at appeal.
Thank you. Arlene, have you any questions for any of the speakers?
Thank you, Chair.
No. Lee, anything you want to pick up on?
No, thank you, Chair.
Very good. Thank you. We'll hear the next batch of speakers, starting with Mr. Simon Gillis, please.
Hi there and good morning to everybody. I'm Simon Gillis. I live in Hales Green, approximately 300 yards away from the site of the event. And as somebody who has witnessed fatality on the A515 and had to have spectators' cars removed from his drive I am objecting to this event. And I'm objecting, I agree with what's been said so far by all the other objectors. I'm not going to go through that again, and I'd like to point out the additional points I'd like to make, but again, I reiterate the same points that everybody else has made and 100% agree with them. So I've made a point about the arrival departure of the event. From the plans I've seen and the submissions, there doesn't appear to be any formal drop-off nor pickup. There's no camping on site, as we know, so people will have to leave the event at some point, and there's no parking on the site. So with a potential of 4,999 attendees to this event, I'm quite curious how the organizer plans for those people to leave both safely, to arrive safely and both leave safely during the event, especially at 11 p.m. at night when probably most of them are severely intoxicated. Just bearing in mind that the A515 is a dangerous road, as I've already said. I've witnessed a fatality on there, and they'll be leaving in the dark, unlit, with no footpath. Also, to the event frequency, I noticed from the application that the application is specifically for the 21st of August 2021. I don't believe it's applicable to state within that application that this will be for a potential 5 events per year. I think from a legality point of view, the application is stating it is for 1 day, and it should be for 1 day only, not 5 potential. I think there's an attempt to set a precedent there. I've got no complaints about the noise nuisance. I share exactly the same point. I'd just like to go back to Mr. Edwards and say thank you very much. I apologise. There's clearly somebody who has a lot of technical acumen on the call. With regards to planning, now I know that this is not specifically a planning call, but we do know, and we've seen from the application, that there are elements within this licensing application that are crossing over into planning, and I think it would be reasonable to expect that the planning committee for Derbyshire Dales is brought into this discussion before this license is granted. And finally, in the application, I noticed that the applicant is saying that the event is supporting the community. So I'd like to just go through a few points I've just picked up on this. So first of all, it's not being held in Ashbourne. It's been held 3 miles outside Ashbourne, and as the objectors so far have said, very close to their own properties. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to benefit Ashbourne, especially as the event closes at 11 p.m. when all the local pubs and things like that will probably be closing anyway. The event is planned to take place the same day as the Ashbourne show. So there's the potential that the event is going to really disrupt that event. It's going to create additional traffic and traffic nuisance within the area as well. And I truly think, and maybe I'm being a little bit selfish because I do live in and around Ashbourne, we need to give the Ashbourne show the opportunity to be a success, being that it's been cancelled in recent years due to COVID. You mentioned right at the beginning about the advertising going up 28 days in advance. I think only in this last 10 days.
Excuse me, sir, you've had your time. Can you sum up, please?
Has a sign. Okay, fair enough. Basically, that's it. Yes, I think there's been no real advertising. It was only by chance somebody saw it on Facebook. A sign went up in the last 10 days and it's now overgrown. I don't see how this is going to impact or improve the community. And I'm calling for the event to be cancelled.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Could we have Miss Liz Grattan, please? You're muted, Liz.
Sorry, I'm also from Snelston. Our parish chair has already spoken. So we're attending as a small group from Snelston on behalf of all of those in Snelston that objected. There are a couple of things that I wanted to add in addition to what's already been said. The first is that we are a farming community and there are a number of our local farmers that have raised concerns about the impact on their animals' welfare as a result of the music, and I don't think that should be discounted. The second thing is that I want to make sure that the committee are aware of some recent, in the last few days, social media comments that have been made by the organisers of the festival, where they refer to the objections from the local residents with some disdain. They refer to us as the minimal few, and they then tongue-in-cheek say, we should invite those people to let them enjoy a bigger garden by coming to our festival. I know that a lot of people took serious objection to the tone and flippancy and disregard that our objections were dealt with by the festival organisers. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to conclude that actually those sorts of statements point to a lack of concern for our concerns, which may well result in poor management of the event on our behalf. So I just wanted to make sure that all of you were aware of those flippant social media posts poking fun at our concerns. The final thing that I want to reiterate is that we found out about this application very late in the day, and yet I think it's testament to the strength of feeling amongst all of those local affected villages that within a very short space of time you received 96 objections, which I think has already been mentioned, is an extremely large percentage of the households have raised a concern about this application. And I would like to echo what everyone else has said, which is I think that this application should be declined outright. Thank
you. Thank you, Ms. Graham. Next up, Mr. Colin Green. Hello, Colin. You're on mute, Mr. Green. Mr. Green, you're on mute.
Got it. Sorry about that. Yes, Colin Green. I live in Wyerston. I will, rather than take a lot of time, most of the objections refer to the noise. I'd like to point out to the committee when they're viewing this that noise from the site already, whether you're in your garden or inside the house with the doors and windows closed, still poses a great nuisance. With regard to this specific event, I'm concerned about the control of traffic on the A515, but also on the minor roads surrounding the area, and the fact that certain people attending these sort of events try to get in illegally and will be using whatever footpaths are available to them. There is also a fact that there will be a lot of illegal camp. Whilst the site itself will not allow camping on the site, that's a piece of cake for them to deal with. For the rest of the people and surrounding farmers who will find illegal camping on their fields during the event would be something which has to be considered, and particularly after hours activities, once all the people who've enjoyed themselves at the show will spill out into the local countryside. I'm happy that the previous speaker mentioned the effect on local farm animals. I've also had one of the farmers comment to me that he was rather concerned about the effects on his dairy herd. And finally, I would say the United Nations Charter on Human Rights says that we are all entitled to expect quiet enjoyment of our lives. If you want to deny the United Nations human rights, you put on a show like this and allow us to all be blasted out of our existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Next up, Mr. Andrew Grenville. Are you there, Andrew?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My property is 800 meters to the west of the site, and it's one of 4 connected dwellings. So we'll all be impacted considerably. I don't want to repeat a lot of what's been said, so just to try and summarize, I think it would be really hard to find a more challenging rural site for the promotion of an electronic dance festival in the Derbyshire Dales, in terms of acceptability to local community. And the main reasons for that, first of all, the site is not remote, which the promoters seem to think it was quite remote, but it's surrounded by 3 villages. The sound consultant says the site is set amongst farmland. There are a number of receptors locally, mostly isolated farms, but it's clear that's not the case. It's not a remote site. It looks remote because it's on a high plateau. And the second point that's been made so clearly is the existing noise levels. This isn't casual NIMBYism, but these are communities that have been working for decades to keep noise from that site at acceptable levels, and working to control a number of days of racing and, fighting successfully to prevent the use of the site by fixed wing aircraft. So, a new night time loud noise source was going to be hugely controversial. So, you know, why would the promoter spend so much time and money to get to this point with such a difficult site? And it just looks like lack of due diligence. You know, did they know about the existing noise issues on the site? And you have to wonder, because there didn't seem to be any local engagement at all with parish councils or with local residents. You know, with properties only half a mile or less from the site, you know, you would have expected some sort of contact. But the fact that they kind of completely failed to take into account the specifics of this site, you know, suggests that the planning didn't really go far enough, their internal planning. And, you know, in a country where local democracy is thriving, you know, that looks really careless or even arrogant. And it doesn't fill you, you know, it doesn't augur well for a sensitive management of an event like this, taking, you know, local community issues into account. And then specifically on the noise management plan, it doesn't, I haven't seen a revised version, but the original version didn't take into account that there were receptor sites to the west of the site, on the other side of the A515. And also it doesn't, and has been pointed out, it doesn't really have any actual limits proposed. The closest it gets to noise limits, it says that, you know, the approach is to maintain a target of 65 decibels. But, you know, that's not a very legally binding statement. So I would suggest that not enough research has been done, groundwork, engagement, and the application deserves to be rejected on that basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grenville. Next up, Mrs. Angela Harrison. You're muted, Angela.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Steve Ratcliffe, who live at Darley House, Darley Moor, Windmill Lane, Snelston. Mr. and Mrs. Ratcliffe and their young children live at the above location and have this has been their family home for the last 70 years. Mr. Ratcliffe says, this is his statement, "Our house is the nearest residence to the site. You can see our property on the application map, and it is near the medical centre. Our house is only the length of 2 football pitches away from the festival site, and it was disregarded on the noise management plan I received. It is not a question of not in my backyard or NIMBYism. We already have a higher noise levels in our backyard than anyone I can think of. We have reached the limit on noise from the site. The high noise levels we are being subjected to are a significant issue for us and our mental health and well-being. We as a family should not be expected to enjoy the level of noise this event would produce. When you consider where we are, you will see we might as well be at the festival, which is unfair. Just because one person thinks it would be a good idea does not mean we should have to endure it. I now understand from Mr. Edwards of the Wyerston Edleston Noise Abatement Group that a revised version of the noise management plan shows my location and how much noise we are predicted to receive. I have not received a copy of this plan from the council, but it has been brought to my attention by Mr. Edwards. I understand that it is claimed that there is a sound barrier between my house and the site. This is not true. I do have a derelict ex-RAF office in the garden, but it's a single-storey building and has no glass in the windows. Our house is a 3-storey house, and from our first floor windows, we have a clear view of the site area. We can see the Darley Diner Cafe and the white tent used for COVID testing, which is the location of the main stage. The only obstruction to any view is leaves on the trees, and this will not make a difference to the noise levels. This is not a sound barrier. Also, our house and the Woodland Caravan Park across the road are very close to the location called the A515 North of site on the noise plan. The A515 North position does not get a decibel correction from the main stage according to the plan. We will not get any decibel correction either. We're only about 400 yards from the main stage and effectively we're in front of it. It is clear that our property will be the subject will be subject to far more noise than the noise management plan suggests. We have asked Mr. Edwards to assess the noise management plan and speak on our behalf as a witness because we do not think the noise plan is correct. Our young children are in bed by 8 p.m. They have a right to sleep. Someone else does not have the right to disturb their sleep, as this applicant thinks he does. The entrance to Darley Moor is only a few yards from our house, and it's very stressful as a family to think that we could have large number of people in intoxicated state or under the influence of drugs wandering around our property late at night. I would ask the committee to put yourself in our place. Our family have lived here before the racetrack started. We accept that and we respect that, even though we don't like it. The least they should do now is show some respect for us and the surrounding community and abandon this selfish proposal. We respectfully ask that the licence be refused. Thank you. Steve Ratcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Members, any questions for any of the previous speakers?
Yes, Chair. The one speaker said there were no parking on site. On the documents I've got, it says there will be parking on site. Can that be confirmed or denied?
That's apologies for me if that's the case. Maybe that's an updated document, but the document I reviewed definitely didn't have any parking on site.
Very good. Right.
I could confirm for you if you like, Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah, there is parking for 3,500 cars on the site, and there's a document within the documents lodged to members, which includes a traffic management plan. But we'll go into that in slightly more detail when it comes to our turn, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you any questions or comments, Eileen?
Just one comment, Chair. I think it was Mr. Gillis who raised the planning, the issue of planning. Planning they are a responsible authority, so the application was served on them at the same time it was served on everybody else during, at the beginning of the 28-day consultation period. They didn't raise objection to the application, and I think they have answered one or two queries of people making representations regarding the amount of use or the number of days that can be used for anything other than motor racing. So that I just wanted to clear up the matter that I think somebody said that they thought the license shouldn't be considered unless planning were consulted. They've already been consulted, was all I wanted to say.
And Eileen, will it be possible to go back to that planning committee post this discussion to confirm the final arrangements of the event before the license is granted?
It's not a planning committee decision, it's a licensing.
But I disagree, because the licensing application submitted has clear aspects of planning within it, and that has been submitted after the planning office have made their decision.
But not after they've, through you, Chair, not after they've responded to this consultation, which is a licensing consultation, not a planning consultation.
Thank you, Eileen. Lee, have you anything to add?
No, Chair, other than just to back up what Eileen just said, that there's clear case law that even though planning is one of the parties that we will consult with, the planning issues and licensing issues are completely separate.
Very good. Thank you. Next,
Mr. Chair, responding to Lee, if planning is truly out of scope of this meeting, then can all planning aspects of the application be removed from the license?
Yes, Eileen, I'm sorry, Lee.
No, thank you. No, the issue on the case law is generally to stop a situation where you're refusing an application because planning hasn't been granted, and therefore planning won't approve a planning application for a licensed premises because licensing hasn't been granted. So you don't end up with a catch-22 situation. That's generally the case on that. Any representations could be taken into consideration. And I think the main issue that Eileen is we have to take into consideration the representations raised by the planning authority, and unfortunately they've not made any representation, so we have to weigh that into the mix as well. Eileen, do we know anything about whether or not there's a planning inspectorate decision relating to no more noise on this site?
I'm not aware. I mean, I can look, but I'm not aware.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We'll go back to the speakers now. Next up, Mr. James Hollingsworth, please. Hi there, James.
Chairman, members of the committee, much of what I would have said has been said, and I'm a local person from Snelston, along with my neighbours and many other neighbours who haven't spoken, are very concerned about this. I tolerate and accept Darley Moor racing. I've lived in it for 48 years, and I've lived here 48 years of my life. But you need to put in the context, which hasn't been mentioned, but it's been alluded to. Darley Moor was a historic woodland, and it was chosen as an airfield towards the end of the war due to its openness for quick flight, takeoff and landing safely, and good defence if it came under attack. The site, as the name suggests, is a moor. It is totally open. It comes off the Midlands Plain and goes east to the lower Dove Valley. And believe you me, the noise really, really does carry. It has no natural sound protection apart from the bungs that have been built. Most festivals are in natural amphitheatres, for example. So that's one point. The other point I wish to make is, which is what Liz Grattan mentioned. We've been painted by the organisers as being NIMBYs. I think you have to be very, very clear about this. Excluding Ashbourne, this application probably affects 1,500 people who live in the immediate parishes surrounding Darley Moor. Now, we accept the motorcycle racing, but why should we have 5 more disruptive events which would basically put any events we have in the summer on hold or potentially spoil them? It's been mentioned by other speakers, and I think that's a very, very important issue. So to support all the other excellent speakers, we have to consider that this is a continuation of noise, which is an addition to public nuisance. And I believe you me, the letters of complaint and the speakers today is only the tip of the iceberg of local opposition to this. And I really do urge the committee to think very, very carefully on what has been said today from a local community who are extremely concerned and extremely worried about this application. So I urge the committee to reject it.
Thank you, James. Next up, Mr. Clive Holmes, please.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Clive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'd just like to reiterate all the previous speakers have said, so I won't try not to repeat what they've said. All I'll say is that if you go onto the Derbyshire Dales website, it promotes the area as the Derbyshire Dales is a paradise for walkers, horse riders, cyclists, and lovers of other activities. We get a lot of horse riding around here, we get a lot of cyclists around here, and we get a lot of walking around here. The noise from this, as it says in the thing, noise is defined as unwanted sounds. I think any noise, however loud it is, 11 hours of it is unwanted. And rather than promote the area, I think it would do the opposite. Local people would dread the days and tourists would keep away. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Could we have Mr. Tim Kelly, please? Hello, Tim. Oh no, Tim's. Hello, Tim, are you there? No. We'll move on to Mr. Andrew Key, is it? Please.
I'm going. Hi, this is Lucy. Hi. Obviously,
hello, Miss Lucy.
Have you got me down as an objector as well?
Yes, we've got you down. Yes.
First, here's my husband. Quickly.
Hi there, it's Andy. Yeah, well, with our property being less than 400 yards from the racetrack, the noise levels on a race day, can't sit in the garden and have a conversation across a table at certain times. And for this to go on for a number of hours until 11 p.m. Is totally unacceptable, in my opinion. The other point I'd like to make is livestock on the property, which again on race days have to be quarantined, stabled because of the noises. And again, that's not acceptable for such a prolonged period over a weekend, or just an 11-hour day, really, to be honest with you. To have to do that on extra days, weekends, bank holidays, for the race days anyway, again, continues over a long period of time for these days is really unacceptable. Yeah, so I'll pass you over to my wife, Lucy, now, who also has an objection.
So Lucy Quay from Wyerston, obviously I'm Andy's wife, and he's detailed to you that the back of our property is less than 400 yards away from the end of Darley Moor Fields. I'm mainly concerned with the trespass issues that we could get from large volumes of crowds, that if they don't disperse out towards the main road exit. We are by the main public footpath that comes through to our village at the back of Darley Moor, and we will have increased issues with trespassing into our woodlands. I'm concerned that although you're saying that there is no camping, that you will get people that will want to camp. They'll be too intoxicated to drive, can't get out of the area. So you will get lots of illegal camping, really, or camping that's not authorised by the venue, who, once the venue has shut their doors, are not going to be bothered with the issue because it's off their site and you are pushing it towards my property and my woodlands. I think the big thing with the noise is we already tolerate the noise, and as owners of livestock, I have found an issue around how I cope with that for the hours in the day. You are now asking me to prolong keeping my animals in and safe for longer hours up into the evening and for more days a year, which just really isn't acceptable. And that's one of the reasons that we're asking for the application not to be granted. Also, I have young children. Again, Darley Moor, the race days, they tend to finish early evening, so we can cope with that. Asking my young children to sleep, possibly with windows open, because we're talking summertime, into late hours of the night, you're actually impinging on my young children. So we strongly ask that this licence and this application isn't granted.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Next, could we have Mrs. Audrey Rose, please?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Audrey Rose. I live in the village of Wyerston, and I'm representing my husband as well as some elderly neighbours. In my experience of music events, both inside and outside, the music starts off loud, possibly at correct noise levels, but as the day and evening progresses, the music noise becomes louder and louder to become outside permitted levels. It is not always the higher sounds that become the problem, but the thump of the bass, and that just goes through my head. I understand a hotline will be provided if we need to complain about excess disturbance, but when and how will this be received? I'm told there will be no camping on the site of the proposed music festival, but what is to stop people camping on other areas of Darley Moor airfield or surrounding fields? This could easily happen. I am presuming the gates to the airfield will be locked at some stage after the event, but the noise disturbance could continue a lot later than 11 p.m. at night. There may be a considerable number of people from Ashbourne attend the event who decide to walk home via the A515 afterwards. If 5,000 people have been at the festival, this will obviously mean increased traffic on that road for a long time after 11 o'clock. To me, that is an accident waiting to happen. I wonder how much police presence there would be, both during and at the end of the festival, to control any unruly or drunken behaviour. I have lived in Wyreston for nearly 39 years and have tried to be tolerant of the motorbike noise from Darley Moor. We knew race days were taking place before we moved to Wyreston, although it was only 8 days a year in 1982. Since then, the number of race days has increased, plus with the addition of track days, the noise disruption has increased considerably. The proposed music festival would mean even more days when we may not want to be in our garden or entertain visitors, and would cause more disruption than ever to our lives and could affect our mental health. An application for 3 days, 5 times a year, is too much on top of the motorbike racing. I know the applicant is saying they only want the festival on one of the 3 days at present, but if the application is successful, I can see after a few years have passed, if the music festivals become popular, they could be for 2 or even 3 days long, as has been confirmed in the conclusion of Annex D in the documentation lodged on behalf of the premises licence holder, and we would then be powerless to stop this happening. They're my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rose. Next, we have Mr. Peter Rosser, please.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're good to go, Peter.
I'm with you, thank you. I should say I'm a member of Edleston and Wyreston Parish Council, and I'm speaking on the Parish Council's behalf. I understand that the prevention of public nuisance is a consideration in the granting of this licence, and I'd like to address the subject of nuisance. From what I've read, the definition of public nuisance in the Licensing Act is anything that reduces the livability of our homes. Our community already has to tolerate noise from many sources at Darley Moor, as previous speakers have enumerated. Motorcycle racing on 14 days per year, motorcycle track days, manufacturers' test events, karting with autograss racing and microlight flying from adjacent sites. In meetings with us, the District Council has taken the view that the extreme level of noise from the motorbikes may not be a statutory nuisance because it's on a limited number of days. It follows that any increase in the total number of days of noise experienced in the community increases the level of nuisance, and the cumulative nuisance from the various noise sources is relevant to the definition of public nuisance with respect to this licence application. The applicant's noise management strategy proposes limits based on the Code of Practice for Outdoor Music Events. We question the target of a 65 decibel limit because the licence applies for more than 3 events per year as set out in the Code of Practice, which the limit should be background plus 15 equals 45 decibels. So they're setting the wrong standard. In any case, we question the relevance of these noise limits to this application, where they propose to add significant noise in an otherwise quiet rural environment that already has more than its share of exceptional noise from the motorbike activity. From our experience of motorbike racing, 65 decibels is very loud. And the prospect of that level of noise with a constant bass beat until 11 o'clock at night must surely constitute public nuisance. The noise management strategy also gives no guarantee that these limits will be met, or if they are not met, any meaningful action will be taken. There is no independent policing of noise control as it happens. The 5 days that are being applied for here are added to the 14 days of racing allowed at the circuit. We
Sorry,
then-
Mr. Ross, can you sum up, please?
I'm nearly there. We'd end up with a total of about 13 blighted weekends a year. That is almost every other weekend through the 7 warmer months of the year, when we'll be unable to use our gardens for much of the time. Surely that's unreasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosser. Members of the committee, any questions for any of the previous speakers?
None from me, Chair.
None from me, Chair.
Very good. Anything you'd like to add, Eileen? Anything you want to put in?
No, thank you, Chair.
Very good. Lee, no, nothing? No. Right. We'll move on to the next batch of speakers. Mrs. Tammy Shirley, please.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Tammy Shirley and I live on the edge of Snelston at the top of Collycroft Hill. I'd like to say that I agree and support with the strong objections to this alcohol and music licence application that we've already heard from the many local speakers. My concerns include antisocial behaviour, the egress onto the A515, particularly of walkers trying to get back to destinations who have perhaps drunk too much and not able to use their vehicles, getting back into Ashbourne. There's a limited taxi facility in Ashbourne, and so we would probably end up with people walking down the A515, which would be very dangerous, particularly if they were under the influence of alcohol. The context of my objection is that Darley Moor site already hosts motor race meetings and track days between the spring and summer period. On these days, the loss of amenity to properties in the surrounding settlements is well documented with Derbyshire Dales District Council. The applicant may well be using permitted development rights in terms of planning for this proposal, but the current application for alcohol and music will facilitate those festival days. No licence, no festival. The noise emanating from this site will have a cumulative effect on the loss of amenity. Myself and others who want to be able to enjoy their gardens and outside space without noise intrusion during those months, March to September. I've read the Noise Management Strategy Joint National Limited report, which in my view is largely theoretical and says that it will evolve as preparations are made for the event. That is of no help in assessing the impact of the event on local residents and their properties. It is very much a desk exercise with assumptions on noise sensitive properties and receptor locations incomplete. The noise impact of this event cannot reasonably assessed on the basis of the information in that report. And from the experience of the motorcycling, I know that the impact will be severely detrimental and that Derbyshire Dales District Council will not have the resource to monitor, let alone enforce any infringement of any noise limits set. I'd just like to say that I fully support all the objections that have been made today, and I urge the licensing committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shirley. Next, could we have Mr. Craig Smith, please? Is there, Craig? Can't hear you, can't see you. Move on, Mrs. Eleanor Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can, Eleanor.
This weekend was a typical summer's weekend in Wyerston. It was very quiet. The majority of the time, the only thing we could hear was the birds singing. Sometimes we could hear bicycles passing. Occasionally there was a passing vehicle. This is the normal level of noise in our village. My children and I rely on this tranquility to be able to relax when we're at home. My job is very intense and stressful. Therefore, I have a physical and mental need to be able to relax when I am at home at the weekends. We already endure 14 days of excessive noise on weekends through the spring and summer months because of the motorbike racing. Therefore, we have first-hand experience of what it is like to live with continuous excessive noise. My reason for objecting to the festivals is not because I fear that it will be stressful, but because I know that it will be stressful. The stress caused by the noise from these dance festivals would be far worse than the stress we already experience from the 8 hours of motorbike racing. I know that the noise is clearly audible inside the house with the windows closed. I know I couldn't cope with this for a full 12 hours. It would have a detrimental impact on my mental health, which in turn would affect my physical health. My leave periods from work are fixed, and I would therefore be unable to take a different day off work to relax after a noisy weekend. My children's health, both mental and physical, would also be negatively affected. They have lived in our peaceful environment all of their lives and can't get to sleep if there is noise. In the summer, they sleep with the windows open. If loud music is playing until 11 p.m, they would not be able to get to sleep until after this. They are too young for it to be acceptable for them to go to sleep at this time of night. The sleep deprivation will affect their physical and mental health as well as their education. During the day, the noise would make it dangerous for my children and I to walk around the village. There are no pavements, so we rely on hearing when vehicles are approaching. I know from the motorbike noise that it is impossible to hear cars approaching, and this means my children and I can't walk anywhere safely in our own community. This risk would also be increased by the significant increase in traffic through our village caused by a festival. How would you propose to prevent additional traffic from using the road through Wyerston as a result of the dance festival? Again, this isn't a fear, but based on experience. The Ashbourne show takes place in Osmaston. The official exit route passes near Wyerston, but there is a huge increase in traffic through the village on that day. We know that people use local lanes to avoid traffic jams on the main official routes. How would you prevent this happening with the festivals? I'm very concerned that a dance festival would make it unsafe for my children to use the public footpaths that run across the airfield. My children have recently begun to increase their independence by using these footpaths to reach their friends' houses, as this is currently safer than them using the unpavemented roads. If there was a dance festival, I would feel unsafe allowing my children to do this. What measures would be in place to prevent anyone from being able to leave the site of the festival other than via the main entrance? What reason is there to permit this activity? And what benefit would it bring to the parish of Edliston and Wyerston or any of the other local parishes?
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Next, Mr. Gordon Tandy, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay, hello, I'm Gordon Tandy from Hales Green, about 800 or 900 metres to the south east of the site. I'd like to strongly agree with what other speakers have said about the cumulative effects of the various sound sources at this site. The racetrack, the Pennine Autograss, the microlights, the owners of this specific site, their racing activities or motor activities have always been controversial, as actually have much of the information that they have supplied regarding the supposed sound levels emanating from those activities. They followed this up by applying, as has already been said, by applying for extra days, which were turned down. And now they have followed that up by this current application for the sound festivals. It seems that the owners of the site, or they're not the applicant, I know, but they're facilitating the application. So I feel that the owners of the site have no regard at all for the quality of life in the local area. To change the subject, the noise management plan, the beginning of the noise management plan seems to imply that existing guidelines, statutory guidelines regarding noise levels or noise level restrictions, are overly stringent and discredited. But my understanding is that during a period of time, the health effects of noise pollution are becoming more researched, better understood, and given greater importance. In 2018, the World Health Organization gave greater scope and detail to its guidelines regarding the national and local formulation of noise control policies. It's generally accepted, it seems. I don't have personal experience of this, but I'm told by the experts that noise pollution has negative effects and contributes towards heart disease and high blood pressure. So rather than the question of noise pollution being becoming of lesser importance as time goes by, I believe that it is of increasing importance as time goes by. Other than that, I agree with everything else that has been said. The this area has a lower density of population than some other areas. That is true, and so it might be considered suitable for noisy leisure activities. But the area already has, I would say, a greater incidence of these sorts of activities than many other areas in the county, which also have a low density of population. And I would ask that this application be refused so as to encourage the more even sharing out of noisy leisure activities, which are economically useful to the county, but that I feel that they should be shared amongst the population of the county that stands to benefit from those activities. In Hales Green, it's not as in Hales Green or other areas around Darley Moor, we don't even get, by and large, many economic benefits from these activities. It is taken by the economic benefits are taken by the applicant, and the local residents are left with the detriments to their quality of life. So okay, that covers it. That covers my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tandy. Next, Mrs. Helen Wainwright, please.
Hello, good morning. One of the
Morning.
problems with being a W is that everybody said everything, but I'm going to go through my notes here, please, if you don't mind. I live in Edliston, which is 2 fields away from the proposed site, along with 5 other dwellings around us. I think the first assumption made in the application that the site is on a plateau and the only effect will be on isolated farms has completely been disproved by the amount of objections shown this morning. I am concerned about noise disturbance in relation to the sound level, the sound frequency, the length of the time the noise will be going on for, and on a larger scale, the proposed amount of festivals. I do have concern about 5 individual festivals, which can be run on either a Friday, Saturday or a Sunday, with the possibility of more being added. Festival season, in my mind, is usually June, July and August. That means that possibly 5 out of 12 weekends in the summer will be subject to disruption. Added to the weekends of the motorbikes, it does mean that over 3/4 of the local weekends during the summer will be disrupted. Timing of an event for 11 hours plus sound checking in the morning and leaving does mean it's going to be a rather long day of disturbance. Also, that although the first festival is proposed for a Saturday, with the noise going to at least 11 p.m, on a Sunday, 11 o'clock becomes even more excessive, with people going to work the next day. I have actually attended concerts indoors, which have a 10 p.m. curfew on a Sunday to limit upset. So perhaps we should look at that as well. Many families, as we just heard, have young children or are older or have family members who work nights. This will obviously make life for them difficult and unacceptable. Sound levels in the report given were assumed to be on a neutral meteorological day. These are rare, and I speak from experience. The prevailing wind is often in the direction of my house and the village within the site, area of the site. I can clearly hear the PA announcements from other events that take place inside my house. You can hear the music played by the Caravan Club discos, the Macmillan pre-walk exercise warm-ups. These are nowhere near as loud as a festival music, and I expect this to become very intrusive inside my home. Music is a very personal thing, and even at lower decibels, if it's not your music taste, it is very difficult to live with and can be very irritating. I have a concern over the noise frequency. The low beat and throb over a period of time can irritate and cause mental strain. We've also got to remember that there'll be other added noise at a festival, noise disturbance from crowd, from traffic, from generators, all of which will add to this disruption. People have discussed the traffic on the A515 and the problems that possibly could have. The site only has one entry and exit. I think it will lead to an increased amount of traffic on the local roads around us, And if, as this first festival is agreed, if it doesn't go ahead, it's on the same day as the Ashbourne one, that will definitely mean an increase in traffic along the roads around us, because this is one of the roads that people use to leave the festival. I'm not sure Darley Moor is used to catering and managing for up to 5,000 people, and I am concerned about how this will be managed. I'm concerned about antisocial behaviour and around us on the footpaths. And I apologise if I sound like a complaining old woman, but this is already causing me very many sleepless nights, and I'm concerned that this could only get worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wainwright. Next, Mr. Wayne Pitcher. Are you there, Mr. Pitcher?
I didn't know I was going to speak, Chair. I just
sorry,
no,
you was added to my list late.
that's okay. I'd just like to. I fully support all the things that have been said in objection to the application. I won't waste any more of your time in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Last of all, could we have Councillor Tony Morley, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of several of the parish councils in my ward. I have the privilege of representing Roston and Norbury on behalf of Derbyshire Dales District Council, and I've been doing that now for 6 years. And as you've seen from the contributions from the residents, it is a great pleasure to be able to represent them. Thank you to the applicant for considering bringing their festival to our beautiful Derbyshire Dales. I think anything which celebrates the end of this lockdown, whenever it comes, is to be applauded. What has become clear, they simply have not had time to do, or not will, to do the research on the stuff. So no point going through all the other stuff, because the contributions have been measured, reasonable, reasoned, and sometimes technical. It's become apparently abundantly clear that this might be a great idea for a festival, but this is not the right site. So I would respectfully request that the committee reject the application, and also remind them of our Derbyshire Dales Council's recent commitment to climate issues, and of which noise and the impact on wildlife is one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Councillor Morley. Members of the committee, any questions for the previous speakers?
No, thank you.
No. Ali, any comments to add?
No, thank you, Chair.
No. Lee, anything to clear it up?
No, Chair, no comments at the present.
Very good. Just bear with me a second. Sorry, I'm just reading the chats. Right, now we'll hear from the applicant. Please, if you could, Mr. Rob Edge, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, acting for the applicant, I've given full regard to the representations made against this application, the licensing objectives as set out in the Licensing Act 2003, the Council's statement of licensing policy, and the guidance issued by the Home Office under Section 182 of the Act. I think it might be helpful if I clarify some key points which have changed since the original application was submitted. And that's that all events planned are for one day only. And that when we use the word events, it doesn't mean for those 5 events in a year that they would all be festivals. The applicants are looking at other type things, sausage and cider type events, possibly farmers markets, but definitively not a festival for each and every event to be held. We've made it clear that there would be no overnight camping on site or adjacent to the site, and the security company employed for the site will do their level best to ensure that people do not camp anywhere near the location. Darley Dance Festival is planned to take place on Darley Moor Racetrack on the site. It is not associated with the current activities. It is simply hiring the site for the purpose of the events. A premises license, if granted, will facilitate the event, and the management team have liaised extensively with responsible authorities and the licensing authority throughout the consultation process. It's the organisers' intention to provide events which are ticket only to all visitors, be they local or from further afield. We believe the events will not only benefit the organisers, but increase the number of visitors to the area who will spend money at local venues, cafes, hotels, and taxis, etc. It will also bring many jobs to local people being employed for the events and for the extended supply chain that will be required for these events. The event will increase footfall to the local area, but without causing a nuisance factor to the local population. All aspects of the event are being carefully planned and will be well managed. This application has been brought together by a team of professionals who are highly respected and experienced within the hospitality industry. The team consists of, not least, a licensing consultant, a well-known security company, very well-known noise management consultant, traffic management plan for car spaces for 3,500, medical first aid cover, and fire cover. The capacity for the site, or our maximum capacity, would be 2,500. But we believe in this first event, the number of tickets that would be sold would be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500. And it's unlikely to exceed that figure. Acting on behalf of the applicant, I've liaised extensively with responsible authorities and the other persons, i.e. those who have objected. We've agreed some amendments to the original application with the responsible authorities, and they in general are now happy that this is a good, strong application with a robust operating schedule for a premises license. We are aware that before an event takes place, there will be a requirement to continue dialogue with some of the responsible authorities, in particular, environmental health, in relation to noise management and public nuisance for the use of the site for these events. That's borne out in the first condition that was agreed with police, which is on page 28, appendix 2. And if I just read that for you, Chair, it says the event organizer's premises license holder will submit an event safety management plan. The draft version of this plan will be submitted 3 months prior to the event start date, and the final plan to be submitted 28 days prior to the event commencing. So that answers the fact that when people look at things like the event safety management plan, the noise management strategy, that those aren't final documents, that those are live working documents, and that they will be submitted to the responsible authorities. And as the licensing manager said, we'll attend a mini SAG with the council so that we ensure that we meet their expectations. Additionally, the following documents had been used to support the premises license application for the sale of alcohol: a premises license operations manual, staff training pack, challenge 25, refusals log, DPS authorizations, and signage. I strongly believe that this event can and will be an asset to the area, with a strong management team and robust policies being in place. The management team will always ensure that they uphold and promote the licensing objectives and step up to the mark. When we talk about diversification of offer in the nighttime economy, it's essential to ensure that there's an offer for all ages and all tastes. You may be aware the Music for Darley Dance Festival is of high energy genre from the 1990s onwards. Given that those that attended music events of this type up to 30 years ago would mean that the average age would be a more mature age group, reliving their youthful weekends and attending a responsibly organised event. The applicant intends to run the event as a professional business. He has invested time, money, and passion to make this successful without compromising on the licensing objectives. He will consistently promote the licensing objectives, and this has been well demonstrated by his willingness to employ the services of a team of consultants to deliver comprehensive packages to support upholding the licensing objectives. We trust you will see this application contains a strong operating schedule, taking everything into consideration and with robust policies. The applicant intends to show that it will be a model event and run in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and will fully cooperate with responsible authorities moving forward and be accepting of expert advice offered by those responsible authorities. Additionally, the event organisers are financially sponsoring a number of charities at the event, and they will also be there to promote their charities at the event. The applicant will mention those in a little more detail, as we are confident this venture would be helping the local area and bring quality events for visitors and local people. Although those who have objected listed many concerns, there were no or very few submissions of substantial evidence presented that any of the licensing objectives would not be fully upheld. The point also within the Licensing Act and within your statement of licensing policy is the fact that there is no cumulative impact zone or cumulative impact area on this site, and therefore it's necessary to separate existing noise by other users from the noise predicted by the presence of a premises license. Finally, when we come to the SAG, that will be the point with people such as highways and environmental health, where the final bits are ironed out, i.e. noise management plan, dispersal plan, and the final traffic management plan. I can, if I may now, ask Mr. Beresford and as the applicant to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself. And he may also ask Mr. Danny Mills, his partner, to speak. And Mr. Minns will probably just briefly cover the traffic management plan if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, that's fine by me. We let the other speakers speak on blocks, so I think we'll do the same with you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Colin Beresford is he up next?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Good morning, Chair. Well, my name's Colin Beresford. I've got Danny Minns with me. We're both local to the local area. Bit of background on me. I've lived in Ashbourne over 40 years, and Danny's lived in Derbyshire over 20 years. I have 18 years experience putting on large scale events. I have done 4 similar music events in the Ashbourne area indoors, and we've had no issues whatsoever. We've employed some of the best in the industry to organise and run the events on our behalf to make sure they're successful for the local community. We've got a security management team based in Derby, noise consultant, licensing consultant, a private fire safety team, and also inter-county paramedics who are doing all the medical support. We want this to be a safe venue and to stage events what will cause as little disturbance to the local residents as possible for those living nearby, and we'll believe we'll create a lot of jobs in the local area and bring money into the local area and economy. We are currently sponsoring 4 or 5 charities, what we'll be making donations to, and some of them will be on site. So their breast cancer research will be there. Dorothy's Dream, which is a little child who's a child's charity, a local dog's home, and every event what I do is I always make a donation to the fire station benevolent fund, just because of family, and it's about looking after the local community. Many thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Danny Minns, please.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Morning, we can hear.
Excellent. Yeah, hi, my name's Danny Minns. I'm a co-applicant with Colin. I just want to quickly talk about the traffic management plan. Also, as I said, I've been in Derbyshire over 20 years as well. The traffic management plan is detailed in Annex H of the agenda document, but just quickly go through that. We do expect all traffic to enter the site from all the main arterial routes, the A50 from the south, whether that's accessing from the M6 or the M1, and the A52 from the north onto the A515. There isn't any other real main arterial routes into the site, and we don't expect all traffic to use those. But I'll read through what the traffic management plan says in the Annex H. So Darley Moor are well equipped to handle a large traffic flow. They are very experienced at this with holding track days, of which I'm sure have previously had no parking issues whatsoever. This is well managed, well run from the many events that's held at this site. So as I said previously, all traffic will enter the site by the main arterial route of the A515. The parking is and will be overseen by Darley Moor themselves, all their staff, and all the parking will be protected in the racetrack itself. The car park area is slightly to the north of the festival site, and this leaves a blue route access at all times for emergency traffic to be able to access the site on the road that runs down the site of the field itself. Darley Moor will be providing all the marshals on site, and there'll be a designated drop-off site and pick-up site within the site area as well itself. This is all clearly shown on the Google Images document included in Annex H. And that's more I can say really. It's very well handled by a very experienced team. So I've got to say thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Minns.
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry to interject. Is this the best time now for Mr. Joins to come in on the noise management?
Mr. Jones can come in now, then after that it'll be Mr. Philip Wright. If that's, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you,
So,
Chair.
Mr. Simon Jones then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody.
My name's Simon Joynes. Just by way of background, I've got 20 years, or did have 20 years experience in local authority dealing with nuisance and public health. I've also got about 10 to 15 years of dealing with music specifically for festivals, and that's what our company specialises in. We do festivals of all sizes and scale across the UK and the world each year, and our team delivers about 150 of those events a year. So by way of background, we are familiar with the situations that surround noise and festivals and the community and how we deal with those. Just to try and start right back at the beginning and try and deal with some of the issues that have been repeated throughout these discussions, I think it's quite clear we've got to say is, yes, we are aware, I certainly was aware of the issues at Darley-Dale around the motorcycling and various other things. It's not unfamiliar territory to me, having dealt with the likes of Silverstone and Donington Park racetrack. What we've got to do, try and draw, is a clear line between this application for a premises licence and for this event, or these series of events, and music, and what's going on at the racetrack. We're dealing with two different separative regulatory regimes here, so we just need to focus on, and certainly I've just focused on, this event, this licence application. In terms of the noise management plan, obviously we've heard some criticism, and certainly I've looked at the objections and been through the calculations, and I'm quite confident what's been delivered in that plan at this point, from my understanding of the legislation. So I think the best way for me to deal with this now is just talk you briefly through the strategy, the plan, whichever you would like to call it, and how we will manage this on the day and where we've got to in terms of levels and permitted levels and things like that. So we are in a rural area. We have got low background levels, and we're applying for a premises licence with a number of permitted noise levels. To observe the permitted noise levels has been quite a challenge in recent years in delivering events throughout the UK, and you'll see that the guidance was withdrawn a couple of years ago, has been out of date. It's been in place since 1995. And there's been a general increase in levels up to 75 dB permitted across the UK for events of this nature. We've looked at that and said we don't need the full 75 limit, and we're going to have a target of 75. So that, in terms of what we've asked for, is significantly lower than what else applies elsewhere over the UK. That applies to receptor positions, so I'm talking residential properties in terms of the measured levels. Caravan parks have been mentioned and various other things. This is purely, we apply this to residential properties. So we've asked for a target limit of 65 at the residential properties with an upper limit of 75, which is applied across the UK generally at the moment. In terms of the feasibility assessment, there was some criticism over missing some of the nearest receptors, and I can only apologise for that. We've now addressed that issue and looked at those receptors specifically to the west and put our calculation to revised noise management plan. And we're confident we can still meet that target level of noise. In terms of the actual event and how it will operate, the sound system's designed so they have a directional factor in them. So they are very directional in the sense of the way they're pointing, and we can alter that and change that on the site. And that's something we do early on in the day in terms of the sound checks to make sure the speaker coverage is doing what it's supposed to do. In terms of the way they move in the event towards how the event is managed, basically we will have a team on site. One of those members of the team will be on site, one will be off site typically. The one on site is there to question the levels that are being emitted from the stage at all times. So as the day goes on, the levels will increase. That's natural of a concert. But what that person on site there is to do is to make sure that those levels are managed and kept at appropriate levels and are not excessive for the audience size, the demographics, all those things that we take into play. In terms of the off-site officer or technician or whoever we employ, a consultant, however you want to refer to them, their role is to go around those monitoring points. They're there to monitor the noise at predefined closest receptors that you'll see in the noise management plan. Their role is there to find problems as well. Our team will actively go out and find problems that may occur or may become an issue later in the day. We do that by searching the local area. We drive around, we try and find the noise. Sometimes the weather conditions do strange things, the noise that we've heard earlier on today, fully accepted. That consultant will be out off-site looking at the noise impact in the community. They'll be in constant communication with the guys on site to try and manage and get that acceptable balance. That's in the overall noise level, that's in the base levels, which cause the most disturbance at these type of events, and it's about managing and proactively controlling that through the event. At the end of the event, we will produce what I call a compliance report. That will be submitted to the local authority, and it will detail everything that's been done and everything that needs to be done in the future, or recommendations for improvements in the future. But that will show compliance with the target levels we set out at the beginning. So any of these, the criticism we've seen earlier on about we set a target level and there's nothing really monitoring, I can reassure the communities around there that the role of my role, and I have full control of the sound systems on these sites, is to make sure, one, we hit those limits and targets that we've set ourselves, and demonstrate that I do that in an effective way. Final piece of the jigsaw is community relations. And one of our team will be there responding to those calls that come in from the community, asking them to respond to complaints. Typically, we will then respond to that person. We will visit their property. We will measure the levels and see if we can make any improvements based on what we know and stand is coming off the site. And that's that direct communication between the two. So just to summarise, we're dealing with a premises licence. We're dealing with although there's no code of practice, it has been withdrawn. We're dealing with what happens elsewhere in the UK, and we've applied that to this site. It's fully compliant with everything we do, and we will be fully monitored during the event. And I think that's quite a quick summary of where we are and how we will deal with this event, like we do all the others throughout the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Last on my list to speak is Mr. Philip Wright. Mr. Wright there. No. Sorry, I just pressed the wrong button. So, any members of the committee have any questions they want to raise with the applicants? Yes, Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question for Mr. Edge. The security team, are they just managing the security on site and off site around these footpaths, etc., and the surrounding areas, or is it just purely on the site? And also one for the applicant, could we just have a brief description on the size or the events that have been managed by these applicants, please?
Certainly, through you, Chair. In fact, our security consultant should be on the call. I'm not sure.
I've not seen him.
No, I haven't seen him on the list there.
Yeah,
I know that he. There you go.
Oh, very good. Can we hear from you then, please, Mr. Wright?
It's Farhan. I'm Farhan. I'm one of the directors of Monarch Security Services. I have submitted a in-depth security plan into the application. In regards to, I have took on board all the concerns and all the objections. All I can guarantee is we will be offering the highest level of security in the premises and outside the premises.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeman, have you any questions?
Can I have the question answered, please, Chair?
Sorry, are you talking about when you asked your other question, Councillor, about number and types of events? Were you referring to me or?
Well, Mr. Minns and Mr. Beresford, really, what are the events that they have actually managed?
Well, I mean, I'll ask him to answer that, but I think that it's certainly relevant, but it's more relevant as to the management team he's put together for this event.
I think the question was, which previous events have they managed the size of?
Yeah, it was discussed earlier on that this was a company that has been recently set up, and I just want to know what events they have actually managed themselves, or what events have they run.
So that's for Mr. Beresford to answer, yes.
Mr. Beresford.
Sorry. Hello, councillors and chair. As regards to other events, what I put on in the Ashbourne area, the other events I put on indoor events at the Empire Club, where I've had various dance nights on. What I've had no issues whatsoever. And as regards to large scale events, what I've been involved with similar to this. Obviously, on the festival side, I've been involved in groups. What I've put festivals on. We set this company up in February to put our own festivals on. Primarily, my experience of working in transport and events for 18 years. I was the transport planner at the London Olympics. I worked there for 2 years. But on the side of large scale events, what I put on a lot of indoor events in Derby, Ashbourne, and Belper, and we've had no issues at all with any of them.
Yeah, but what are these events? Can you just name a couple of them that you've done?
Yeah, so I brought Dave Pearce Dance Anthems to Ashbourne, to the Empire. That sold out within 3 weeks, and that I had Monarch Security on the door there at the Empire. I've had Belper Leisure Centre where I put on dance nights at Belper Leisure Centre.
Can I just
and
ask?
I put sporting events on as well with football.
This is an outdoor event though, not an indoor event. So what experience of outdoor festivals, please?
So,
no problem.
Can't see.
So on the outdoor festival side, I've been involved in a couple of festivals up in Cheshire called Reminisce. So Reminisce is an event held in the Northwest where they have anything up to 9,000 people. I've been involved in the planning of that, and with the company involved in that, the planning of that, and other large events as well.
Very good. So, committee members, have you any further questions?
No further questions.
Arlene, have you got any comments you'd like to make on what's been said?
Yeah, if I could just have clarification from Mr. Edge. You mentioned in your submission that this wasn't going to be just festivals, that the events weren't necessarily music festivals. They were going to be things like farmers markets and such like. But when was that? When were we notified that it wasn't going to be up to 5 events as music festivals? Obviously, that's what we've all been working towards.
Yeah,
sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask another question which Mr. Edge should be able to answer at the same time? Are we specifically with this licensing application dealing with a single one-time only event on the 21st of August, or are we dealing with 5 events? Because it would appear that the opportunities to circumvent this further licensing application for 4 more events will be included within that. So maybe, Mr. Edge, if you could answer that at the same time.
Yes, you can. I'm just struggling to see who's speaking at the moment. There's no pictures coming up for people speaking.
I just asked a question of Mr. Edge.
Very, very good, Arlene. If you can go ahead, please, Mr. Edge, with Arlene's question.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a change. I probably over-embellished what I was saying there, Eileen, in as much as, you know, partly to allay people's fears that this would be 5 live music festivals that, you know, some of these, and there's a trend at the moment for live outdoor orchestra events, which have become very popular. It would still be an outdoor event, still within the same licensed perimeters, but just not necessarily the electronic dance music that's planned for this particular event.
So what's really worrying there is that you're asking an application to be approved for events that we don't even know what they're going to be? How can that happen?
That can be answered.
Tell us what it is. It's going to be up to whatever you decide whenever you want to decide. That's what happened.
Can we go through the chair, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't see who's speaking here. I've got two hands raised. One's Councillor Lees. One's Councillor Lees, and one's Councillor Lees, and the other one is Councillor Shirley. So, Councillor Lees, could we have your question, please?
Sorry, shall I just answer that one, Chair? The final bit of the last question.
I didn't see who it was from, but yes, please.
Okay. It's covered within the condition that was requested by the police in Appendix 2, where we have to submit an event safety management plan 3 months in advance and a final plan 28 days prior to an event. So I see it that as that event safety management plan is done for this coming event and any future events, that would have to be specific about what type of event, what the capacity was expected to be, and covering all the other elements of the application.
Chair, could I come back to my question?
Yes, Eileen.
Thank you. Or just to some clarification on that part, because that leads on to my second question of Mr. Edge, where you referred to the conditions or the measures, should I say, that could be translated into conditions if the committee so chose, that you agreed with the police, and that one in particular about the event safety management plan being submitted 3 months prior to an event. I mean, it has been assumed that we are talking music events. I can't imagine it would take 3 months to organise a farmer's market. Also, I think it's worth noting that the second condition in Appendix 2, which talks about the Derbyshire Event Safety Advisory Group, and you've alluded to that yourself, that will only be if the criteria of the risk assessment of the emergency planning manager at Derbyshire Dales considers one's necessary. It isn't for the police to condition that you have to attend one, which is why I think that was amended to if requested to do so, because it will be up to them as to whether or not, be up to the emergency planning as to whether or not one is necessary. I'm not sure one would be necessary for a farmer's market. I'm sorry to keep going on about the farmer's market, but that was a slight surprise to hear it mentioned. That's all, Chair, for me. If Mr. Edge wants to comment on that.
No, just to say, I think, you and I did discuss, that second condition that was requested by the police. And I went along with that, knowing it was unlikely, but asked for the wording to be changed to if requested to do so, but fully in the agreement that, prior to the event, that we would meet with yourself, with environmental health, highways, and anyone else to finalise the sort of crossing the T's and dotting the I's for the various documents required for the first event.
Question through the chair, please.
Sorry, Councillor Lees is up next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. May come back on my previous questions, really. The noise consultant states that you're going to have people out and about reporting back. I know these areas very, very well. Having lived in the surrounding area most of my life, all my life, in fact. Communication, how are they going to communicate back to Darley Moor? Mr. Jones can answer that one.
There's numerous methods we can use. If we have good communication, we can use mobile phones, and we have dual SIM mobile phones to get some receptions. If not, we'll use a series of radios, depending on that was, and that's a similar situation we had at the Why Not Festival, which is probably the most local example we did. We knew there's communication black spots, so we have to deal with it in other ways, and that'd be radio or different networks that are available to us to get that get that communication routes open.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was getting at, because I know full well that mobile phones do not work in most of these areas we're talking about. There's black spots everywhere in all these locations. And also, you've heard back to the, I don't know whether it was Mr. Edge or Mr. Beresford about the providing jobs. Looks to me like this is all outside people that's being employed to do this. What sort of local jobs are we talking about? And is it just for one day, or what is the extent of this providing local jobs?
Hello, Mr. Lees. As regards to the jobs, can you hear me? Yeah, am I coming through okay? Yeah, sorry. As regards to the local jobs, so the security company, what we've employed are from Derby. The paramedics are based in Derby. And as regards to the local jobs, there's going to be a lot of local event planning jobs coming up, which will be permanent roles in the Ashbourne area. And there'll be a lot, and we're talking numbers of jobs, probably between 5 and 10 to start with. And then obviously we'll look at that on a year-by-year basis.
Thank you.
No problem.
Very good. Councillor Andrew Shirley, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I suppose I've got a number of questions. I'm slightly concerned that Mr. Edge seemed to try and lessen the impact of the objectors on noise. Those that have made the effort to come and speak at this event have serious concerns over noise. The reason that isn't the technical data there is simply because they, as the event's organisers, haven't produced it, which is why the authority shouldn't permit the events to go ahead. We've already heard that they're now sort of saying, well, it might be other events and not just music events. So it's highly questionable. Monarch Security said that they would also deal with security outside the event. And I suppose the question I've got there is, are we just talking about people on the gates, or are they going to manage security throughout the villages and neighbouring properties? I'd like to know exactly how many people they'll actually employ to deal with security outside the event, and what radius they'll cover. And finally, my concern about what Mr. Beresford has said and his experience in the past, I would suggest that organising an external event, 4,999 people, is very different from organising an event in the Empire Ballroom in the centre of Ashbourne. So, sorry, just to clarify, Chair, I would like to know the amount of security that Monarch will be providing in terms of number of people and the radius they cover outside the site.
Very good. Is that, who'd like to answer that? Is it Sam? Look, going through my screen. Faham. Did you're on mute, Faham?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So within the premises, we'll have 30 security guards, and then we will have 2 response teams around the premises of the venue, patrolling in fours. So you'll have eight staff who will be around the premises.
Very good. Is that okay, Councillor Shirley?
So I suppose the question that he hasn't answered is how far are they going to cover all the surrounding villages? Because then we're leaving the site could get, well, the 2 issues we got is people who are expelled from the site, people who leave the site who are quite inebriated, and the third are those obviously trying to get access to the site without buying a ticket, and all of those present problems. Bearing in mind we're looking at several villages and lots of scattered houses, It's a question of, what sort of radius are they looking at providing that security? Is it just around the perimeter fence, or is it actually a radius of, say, 4 miles?
No, it's just around the perimeter.
Yeah, can I just jump in for 1 second, just to let you know, I see hands raised by Councillor Tony Morley. Sorry if I think Mrs. Q or Key, sorry, apologies for that. Jonathan Edwards and a Mark and Janice Bryant are all showing hands.
Yes, I've got them. Next up, Councillor Morley, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, doing a bit of research about the security, that Monarch Security, who are based in Pride Park in Derby, were only incorporated on the 18th of September last year, 2020. So it's a new company. I'm concerned about their track record. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Okay, Andy, whoever Andy is, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, it's me, Lucy.
Oh, Lucy, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just obviously concerned about the security. Can you tell me how you justify 8 security staff for a venue that can hold nearly 5,000 people? And also just looking into the experience of Mr. Berriford with the Reminisce Festival. If you care to Google it, all the news is adverts about drugs overdoses, and I'd just like to know how you manage that when you have got bad publicity against the other festivals that you are saying you have controlled and organised, please.
Yeah, if I can answer those, please, Chair.
Yes, okay, Rob.
The first one is the security numbers for this event are based on the 1,500, which is what we expect to be the upper figure. And this was something that was discussed in great detail with the police when they read the security report. And if they felt there were concerns that there was insufficient security or SIA, or that the security plan wasn't in depth enough, they'd have either asked for it to be amended or they'd have put in a formal objection on the basis of crime and disorder.
Very good. Thank you.
And the other bit really is just about when we talk about Mr. Minns' previous experience or Mr. Beresford's previous experience, everybody starts somewhere and grows bigger. And that's why both of them as event organisers have brought in, reputable people to assist them in bringing these events together. Hopefully that covers the points that were raised, Chair.
Very good. Councillor Morley, is that your hand still up?
No, Chair, thank you very much indeed. I must have forgotten to take it down. Apologies.
Mark and Janice Bright, you're next up.
Yes, I have 2 questions, one for Mr. Joins and the second one for anyone out of the applicant's team. The first one for Mr. Joins is you've not used the caravan park as a receptor due to the fact that we're not residential and classed as commercial. That is how I believed you answered it. But a caravan park license is for temporary residents of caravans for holidays. And we will have, any summer weekend, 75 to 100 people. So you could class that as around about 50 properties. So why haven't you still not used it as a receptor and added that to the equation? The second question to someone within the team is, on the first application, you showed in detail the stage and the arena as one arena. On the noise document, you said there were 2 arenas. On social media, you now say there's 3 arenas. How many are there going to be? And where is the position of the 3rd arena? Thank you.
I can probably answer both those questions. In terms of the caravan park, it's a commercial operation. I think the environmental health officer has left the meeting now from the local council. But commercial operations, yes, I appreciate your arguments of residential caravan site, but no, it's a commercial operation, and therefore it's not classed as a receptor. We only class residential houses, properties as receptors, and that has been standard throughout the guidance and various other things for many, many years. If we had to consider everything that existed, no events would take place in the UK. In terms of number of stages, yes, there is differentiation between documents and people and what they're doing at the moment. That is normal for a festival as it takes place. We will assess, and as the applicant gives us new site plans, we will review and assess the number of stages in terms of our noise management plan, in terms of its impact on the residents, whether it'll work. And there's very many occasions throughout my daily working life where I have to go back to clients and say, yes, you've added a third, thank you for the notification, it won't work on the noise levels and therefore we can't have that. It might be then we look at the other stages and their position and orientation to make it work, but the reality is we're trying to hit that target value all the time. So there's a review process that takes place almost right up to the beginning of the event. You know, a couple of weeks out, stage paint change and stage positions do change. That hopefully answers your query.
So going back to the point of the caravan park, basically we're commercial, and the attitude seems to be from the applicant's team is that we're not taking it into account. But there's been no mediation, there's been no consultation with us. You're not even willing to appreciate that you are disturbing up to 100 people on this park, and that I feel is disgusting.
I can only answer the way the guidance has always been applied across the UK. At the moment, we haven't got a license. Once we have a license and we look at other, it's not the first caravan park we've ever had to deal with. Once we have a license, it's then the applicants, and have made the commitment, certainly we have, to go and speak to those local businesses and explain what's happened. But those discussions can't take place until we have a license. At the moment, we can't make a nuisance, but once we know we can, or create noise, we can then come back to you and have those discussions with you. But this is a conversation that takes place up and down the country, day in, day out, with festival organisers, the likes of yourselves, local businesses that may be impacted by the event.
Well, I think you're being very narrow-minded concerning local residents and the business. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I just say, Laura Salmons from Environmental Health has just come back and might be able to just shed a little bit of light on this. Are you there, Laura?
Afternoon.
Hello, how are you, Laura?
Yep, not too bad, thank you. I think it's Environmental Health's intention to work with Joins and Nash and the applicants to make this work as an ongoing document and forever changing.
Very good, thank you. Oh, I've lost my hands. There we go.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, come back.
Just to say on behalf of the applicant, I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Joins has just said, is that, you know, if the license were granted, we will go and talk to the owners of the caravan park and we will find a solution. That's the way these events work.
But surely you should do that beforehand.
The reason
if you want to get people on your side, you talk to them beforehand and you mediate with them. You discuss things with them.
It's general practice that the mediation takes place during the 28-day consultation period and leading up to the hearing, because the financial cost of going out with experts such as noise consultants is very, very costly if you do it prior to obtaining a premises license.
So doing it within the 28 days, why didn't I receive a visit or a consultation within those 28 days?
It's done by correspondence during that period, unless you'd contacted me, because my details were on the blue notice. And if you'd requested, I'd have come and seen you.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry, but can we make sure all questions go through the chair or it becomes a free-for-all? If people start asking questions without going through the chair first, I will start cutting you off. Thank you.
Thank you. To say, Ali, could you comment on that, please? Is there...
What respect, Chair?
Well, just the noise at the caravan park, and it's not being monitored.
Well, I can't talk on the noise monitoring. That would be Laura, Chair. But I mean, with regard to Mr. and Mrs. Bright's representation, they made one as individuals because they live in the area and would be affected, and they legally made one as an affected business because the Licensing Act does allow businesses or residents who are affected to make representation. So I assume that the matters he's raised would be taken into consideration by the applicant at some stage. I mean, I don't think there's any set way in which to consult. I think the consultation with individuals and residents was slightly hampered by the request of a large number of people making representation who didn't want their contact details given to the applicant. So it would have been slightly difficult for the applicant's representative to get in touch with them during that 28 days. And that aside, 96 was an awful lot of people to get in touch with during that 28 days. So that's all I've got to say, Chair, really.
Very good. Thank you, Ali. Can we move on? Mr. Jonathan Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yes. Obviously, we don't want to make it adversarial and that sort of thing, but through the Chair, I'd like to clarify a few things. Just to tidy up first about the caravan site. It's not for me to make much comment on whether it qualifies or not under licensing, but I can say under my expertise of noise monitoring and assessing noise management plans that I've done the calculations for the caravan site for information of the committee if they do wish to want to take any notice of it. Is the main stage will produce a sound level which will result in 74.4 decibels LEQ, which is the average. So it's 74.4 from the main stage, and it will produce on the second stage for Mr. and Mrs. Bright's property. The second stage will produce 79 decibels LEQ, and also through the Chair, I'd like to just turn to Mr. Ratcliffe's property. And obviously he is a permanent resident, so he does qualify in any case. I'd like to just go back to the noise management plan, which says an attenuation of 10 decibels is assumed when the noise screen completely hides the source from the receiver. So what he's saying is, if somebody cannot see the stage or the power supply, they get a 10 decibel reduction off their off the amount of power that's received at their property. But you can't possibly, on this noise management plan, which has now been revised, you've got a barrier attenuation for 10 decibels at Mr. Ratcliffe's property, which is assumed it's completely hidden from the noise source. Well, Mr. Ratcliffe, Mrs. Ratcliffe, we've got clear view of the stage area. So the most attenuation could be possibly is just ground attenuation and a little bit of leaves. I mean, I've discussed this with Laura, and it's probably 2 or 3 decibels over that distance. But the noise management plan has taken 10 decibels off at number 73, which is 73 decibels for Mr. Ratcliffe's property from the main stage, and then taken another 8 decibels off for orientation correction. But in reality, this orientation correction, the main stage is pointing, as Mr. Ratcliffe wanted pointing out by Mrs. Harrison, the main stage is pointing towards the location on your map as A515 North. If you look a little bit to the left, you'll see Mr. Ratcliffe's house. So you can't possibly reduce it by 8 decibels just because it's just a few degrees off the power line of the power from the main stage. Now, this application wants to fill the site area with 98 decibels. So obviously, some of it's going to go across at 98 decibels. So you can't have barrier attenuation of 10 when you can see the property. And you can't have an orientation correction of 8 when it's so close to the centre line of the power source, which is 0 at A515 north. The noise management plan, as you might see on the updated version, has given A515 north 0 correction for orientation and just 5 decibels for reduction for barrier attenuation. So there's no difference in attenuation of any barrier between A515 north and Mr. Ratcliffe's property. Just on that point of Mr. Ratcliffe's property, I'm qualified in doing these calculations, and if you turn to page 4 of the noise management plan, the calculations are done under, it looks complicated, but it isn't really. It's on the top paragraph, is L2 equals L1 minus 20 log R2 R1. Well, that is inverse square law principle of physics, which is basically like the rule of 6 in common terms. So every doubling of distance, the decibels reduced by 6 approximately. It's actually a little bit more than 6, but just over 6. But when we come to the predictions of the noise management plan regarding Mr. Ratcliffe's property, from the second stage, Windmill Lane A505, I think he means A515, Mr. Joins is correct, entirely correct in saying the distance is 236 metres. But he says on the noise management plan, the revised version that people watching this Zoom meeting probably won't have, but I obtained it from Eileen. The noise management plan says the distance correction from the second stage to Mr. Ratcliffe's house is 71. The actual truthful calculation is 76.6. So on those figures, it's mathematically impossible to get down to the target level of 65 dBA, which is a LAEQ figure, at Mr. Ratcliffe's property. It's also impossible to get down to a 65 dBA LAEQ level at the caravan park. But with regard to Mr. Ratcliffe's property, and he's asked me to be a witness for him, it's just not possible. And I've done some calculations, and to get down to those figures for Mr. Ratcliffe's property and the caravan site, rather than having the 2 stages running at 98 decibels, the maximum you can have is around about 88.6 decibels. And I'm willing to, field any questions from anybody. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Thank you. I don't know if the questions are directed at anybody in particular.
Chair, I can maybe try and answer some of those queries, if that's okay.
Please.
Quite simply, I don't know what Mr. Edwards' background is. I've checked the Institute of Acoustics while being online, because I've been taking a fair bit of criticism here, which I accept in some instances, but I certainly not a member of the Institute of Acoustics. I'm not sure what his background is in audio from speaker systems. And certainly from the information I've just heard, I'm going to summarise the fact that in terms of the directionality of speaker systems, the knowledge of speaker systems, and everything else that goes with that, the calculations I've checked again while I've been on this Zoom this morning are correct. In terms of the mitigation offered by the house off Windmill Lane, if that's the one we're referring to, then I'm just looking at Google Maps there again in front of me, and the outbuildings exist and the structures that exist, which allowed me to come to that conclusion of the 10 dB reduction for the barrier. It's quite simple. The measurement positions, and we've been alluded to many times, are on the ground. They're not a third floor, they're on the ground. So looking at that building, there are structures in the way. If I was to take a measurement in the rear garden by looks of it, I would get attenuation off the site by 10 dB. Therefore, the calculations presented in the report are correct and accurate, and I'm not going to be questioned on that again, if that's okay.
Thank you. Mr. Matthew
Can I
Taylor.
come back on that, Chair, please?
I think your question's been answered as far as they can answer.
Well,
thank you. Mr. Matthew Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll talk through the Chair and on behalf of the Parish Council. The responses to the questions that we've heard today from the applicants and their representatives have been very much around good intent and what they would like to achieve, that they may achieve, and what they would manage to achieve. There are no specifics, and I will use the word commitment because that's a very important word with regard to civil law and with regard to licensing, and as is the upholding of the objectives. And the key objective today here is noise, and there has been a great deal of discussion around public nuisance. And if I was to look at the submission by the applicants, they have taken a good deal of effort to answer conclusively and to commit to what they will achieve for the police with regard to the licensing objectives within the event itself. The important point here is that the key question of public nuisance and how that will be controlled and how the applicants will commit to doing that in front of this license application and ahead of this committee, so that the committee are given all of the facts for them to make a reasonable judgment based on what they have heard today, is not possible. Because as Mr. Edwards has said, he has over 1,000 hours of knowledge of this site. He has done a great deal of analysis over many years, and we must take heed of his testament. And on top of that, that is fact. Now, if Mr. Simon Joines can come back and say, I dispute that scientifically and factually, and is so confident in that, then the applicant and their representatives would have had the confidence to commit to a noise management plan ahead of this hearing. My final point to that is that we have grave concerns at the parish council that this license, if granted, is in perpetuity, and therefore any discussions will be after the event, and it would be, and we would know that it would be very difficult to actually control noise and public nuisance after the event, because as we've heard today from Simon Joines and from Mr. Edge, it will be all about consultation, conversation, meeting of minds, coming to agreements. Now, if none of those meeting of minds and agreements are met, then the parishes that surround Darley Moor will be left with the effect, and that's the key point. So thank you very much. That's the end.
Thank you. Mr. Andrew Cross. Are you there, Andrew?
Yes, sorry, I think I was just trying to take myself off mute. Yeah. Thanks for giving me the time to ask a couple of questions. Mostly they are questions of Mr. Joines. In some of the comments you made earlier, you discussed that the guidance and the assessment methodology that you've used does not take into account cumulative effects, and that's not relevant to the assessment that you've made. I would dispute that. I believe the licensing objective is about public nuisance. I think from what I've read, and I'm not an expert, but I've read quite a lot over the last couple of weeks about this, and the definition of public nuisance is a lot more broad than the statutory nuisance that is discussed under environmental legislation. So I think the cumulative impact of the noise from these festivals at the receptors is directly relevant to the assessment of public nuisance. And I certainly believe that a level of even of 65 dB at the receptors would be an extreme nuisance for the people that live around this venue, particularly against measured and accepted background noise levels of between 30 and 35 dB at the sort of times of night we're talking about. So very broadly, that's 30 dB louder than background. That's 8 times louder than background. When I want to use my garden on a Saturday evening, I can't. That subject of the 65 dB limit, I'd also like to question, as we've heard, potentially this license isn't going to lead to 5 music festivals a year, but that's what's being applied for. And if this license is granted today, that's what will be allowed to happen. So what we are granting with this license application today, if it is granted, which it shouldn't be, is the license literally for the applicant to make noise, reach noise levels of 65 dB till 11 o'clock at night, 5 times a year. I'd also like to ask about the sort of the roving teams of noise monitors that have been described. 65 dB has been mentioned as a target level, and there has been some correspondence during the consultation period about effects of meteorological conditions, unfavourable wind, and the potential for that to be exceeded. The response we got to those questions essentially said that if the wind blows, then yes, it will be higher than 65 dB. So exactly what measurements will the noise consultants be taking? What will they consider threshold levels for action, and what actions will be taking? Are you saying that if the noise anywhere exceeds 65 dB, then the sound system will be turned down? Or is it just that you'll consider it, think about it, and then not turn it down because you don't want to cause disruption to the event? And the other question I'd like to ask is about the directionality that we've talked about, and Mr. Joins' description of very directional PA equipment set up to modern standards. But again, the primary objective of this license application, as I understand it, is that the initial event will be an electronic dance event, which means a lot of bass. My understanding, which is limited and really a layman's understanding of these things, is that bass is much less directional than higher frequencies, and it has the highest energy through the sound spectrum as well. So the average attenuations that have been calculated in Mr. Joins' report won't apply to the bass, and the orientation factors won't apply to the bass. And sort of before I then ask Mr. Joins, or through the chair, ask Mr. Joins to respond to those questions, can I just say that I appreciate that his report has followed the guidance, followed the relevant code of practice. But I think in reality, what we're talking about is real world situations, real people's lives, real detriment to our quality of life. And I think that needs to be considered as the outcome of his report needs to be considered in that context. Thank you very much.
Very good. Mr. Jones, would you like to answer that
Yes,
question?
certainly. I think I've written the four significant points down there. In terms of your reference to the bass levels, in actual fact, in the real world and the modern speaker systems we use today, they're actually easier to control than the high frequency. The high frequency are very directional in one level, but the actual bass, we can make not only high directionality in the bass, but we can put in what is described in the industry as beam steering, and other terminologies used to project that bass in directions that we need it to. To the extent that on a modern day festival, we can even put the artist cabins and have it behind the main stages. So the bass is actually easier for us to deal with in a lot of senses than the high frequency. In terms of those teams that are out and about in the community, I will stress once again, if I was to apply nationally adopted standards as it is today, I could apply for 75 dB upper limit, if you want to put it that way, and play music to that and be comfortable in asking for that. What I'm saying is I'm going beyond that and going for the 65. Now, when we're out in the community monitoring the noise, responding to complaints and various other things, our teams will work together to do the monitoring. If they hit, say, 66, 67 dB, there is a process that they go through in their own minds that is well driven into them, and it's a discussion between the team members. Is that a result of the weather conditions? If it's a result of the weather conditions and you're downwind, it's very difficult for us to control that. But that's an acknowledged fact in the music industry that you can't comply downwind on some occasions. I can't plan what the weather's going to be.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is
No, let me finish.
Still experience
Excuse me, if you'd let Mr. Jones finish what he's saying.
Thank you. The wind will play havoc with noise. We know that. You know that from the motor racing. What I can't do is lower the level of a stage to account for a strong westerly wind or something like that. So we look at the weather, see if we can mend the levels and get the levels back down to an acceptable level. The team, if we were to say we're at 67, 68 dB a residential property, they would go back to the main stages and make sure those main stages set out in my noise management plan, those main stages are operating within acceptable levels. To provide an audience satisfaction for a festival, I know the industry needs to provide 95 to 98 dB. If we find there's a breach off site or an increased level, and our guys on site then radio back to the site and see that they're playing at 102, we action a reduction of that sound site they're back down to within that band of noise that we know has to provide for a festival. If we go below that band, there is another problem. We then get a crowd surge towards the speakers possibly, and we get other issues such as discontent in the residents, and we end up with public disorder issues. So there's a very careful balance of what we do on site, what we do in the community to keep within those target levels that we've set ourselves. In terms of the cumulative effect, we've been through this a couple of times on this conversations and Zoom and license and hearing. What I keep getting repeated to me is that this is a cumulative impact of the motor racing and the music. We've got to separate these two issues. This is purely a license for this music event. I appreciate that you as a community have a lot of other noise, but I can't take that into consideration. And I'm sure the legal representatives say it's two different regimes that are in place here, and that needs to be dealt with in those appropriate levels. And I'm just looking at the last comment. The level of 65 in the national guidance. Yes, that is what the guidance says. If we have more than 3 music days, that level will drop, and that will restrict what we can do. But at the moment, we're applying for the licenses for 5, but we're only proposing 3 music days. If the applicant was to come to me and say, I want 5 music days, that 65 limit would drop. But at the moment, it's 3 days. It can't be applied. Likewise, I can't apply standards differently throughout the country. If we applied lower standards, there would be no music events. And that's why we see a change in the guidance that's taking place and the review mechanisms are in place at the moment, the withdrawal of the old, is because the nature of events has changed in the last 20 years. And therefore, there is a move towards more event days and higher levels. We're not asking for that. We're not asking for that. I've been quite clear that in that plan.
Very good. Thank you for that. Mrs. Audrey Rose, please.
Sorry, just unmuting. My question is slightly different. I was wondering how much notice of any future events the applicant was going to give to the local villagers. This year they are planning to clash with the Ashbourne show, but all the local villagers have fetes, weddings, the well dressing, things like that, which would, if they clashed with a music festival, would be detrimental to the villagers. So I'm just wondering, were they planning to give 12 months notice of any future events, be it a music festival or a farmer's market, which has also been mentioned, which again would take business away from a local village fete?
Very good. Mr. Edge, could you answer that? Or?
Sorry, just unmuting, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think that because we're obliged to give 3 months' notice to the police of any future events, that we would find a mechanism of notifying local residents at the same time.
But for a village fete or a well dressing, I'm sorry, Chair, a village fete or a well dressing is planned far more than 3 months ahead.
I mean, it's quite conceivable that next year, at the start of the year, should they be granted the license, that they will plan out the 5 events, if they're allowed 5, for the whole year. I mean, once conditions are placed on the license, such as those that the police have laid on us, you know, that says we need to give 3 months notice. We would obviously always try and plan events further in advance than that. And if we know that we're planning an event and it's more than 3 months in advance, then we would give more notice than that.
Thank you. James Hollingsworth next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions to Mr. Joins, really. If the application went ahead and the festival was held, I think we all know, and you've mentioned that it's not connected to the motorcycle racing, but for us locally, it's a continuation of noise disturbance. And that's the key point many of us have been making. But you mentioned that you'd have roving monitors to if people report it, and I'm pretty sure that if this goes ahead, you will get quite a lot of calls from people from a wide area. So I wonder how many people you would have to do that, and if their complaints were upheld, what are you going to do? Because are you going to go and turn it off? Are you going to go and turn the speakers down? Will it stop? Because that will create problems for your attendees. But how are you going to manage that? Because you could have multiple complaints, some within a 5-mile radius. So that's one point. How many people will be there, and what can they actually do? How many times have you visited the site, and will you be there on the day of the festival if it goes ahead? There's another question. And then the only other final comment I have is that I'd asked of the committee is, I'm under no, quite a few people on this call will know me, and I'm not a person who complains or moans about things, but I don't think the committee should be under any delusion that if this goes ahead, it will bring any community benefit to the communities at all. That's it. Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Jonas. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can just answer those questions. I'll use an example of Why Not, on the scale of Why Not festival that we've been involved in, and we have a team of 3 that will deal with that whole festival site, and that's quite generous in the industry that we work in. In terms of how we deal with a number of complaints coming in, there is a gentleman. I say gentleman because I know who's going to do the event if it goes ahead. There is an individual who will be responsible for monitoring outside the arena. We will monitor the most sensitive receptors positions that we've got. We'll understand within the first couple of hours, and certainly a lot from the sound check in the morning, what is the impact on that day going to be and where. Providing we're monitoring those positions, if calls are coming in and I've got a neighbour that's a street away or in the same village, if I'm monitoring in that village already, which I will be doing, there is not necessary to visit every single complaint because we wouldn't get any data. We just deal with people all day. So the key is for us to be able to get the data and get an acceptable balance about where we're getting that data from and the complaints that are coming in. And it's a judgment on the 2 that where we do that monitoring and which ones respond to. So if we get a complaint from a village and we've been there 10 minutes before doing a monitoring position in the locality, the chances are we won't return. If we get one from far away, which we weren't expecting, the chances are we will respond to that one because we need to understand what's going on that site.
Thank you. Mr. Bone, Mr. Michael Bone, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, can I just explain that I have another meeting to go to now? I think we've covered most things, Chair.
Very good, yeah.
But
yes, if you want to leave now, that's fine.
Hello, sorry, Chair. I'm sorry.
Running the meeting,
sorry.
so I just did good than that. I think we've covered most things there.
There was a very specific question to Simon Joins, which Andy Cross was unable to finalise, and I wondered if I might just be able to very quickly put that forward.
Chair, it's Matthew Taylor who's speaking.
Matthew Taylor.
I'm sorry, sorry, Chair. Matthew Taylor speaking. Just to repeat, Andy Cross wanted to follow up with an important question to Simon Joins, which he was unable to put, and he's asked if I could just quickly put that to Simon Joins before he leaves the meeting.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It was really just for a clarification around public nuisance and his understanding of public nuisance. And the question is, you refer to the code, and then you refer, and what we're talking about is public nuisance. and really the question is 65 dB is too loud and will create a public nuisance. And how will you commit to guaranteeing that there will not be a public nuisance? I mean, guarantee that's the question. You have to guarantee there will be no public nuisance, because you've said you'll try hard not to, and if there is one, you'll listen to people's concerns. So the question is, can you guarantee to the committee that there will be no public nuisance? Thank you.
I similar to the lines of what I said before, public nuisance in this event, you follow the published guidance and precedents set in the UK. Precedent at the moment is a 75 dB level. I've committed to a target of 65, and my calculations say I should be able to achieve that. I'm going to manage it on the day. And in terms of the public nuisance, if I'm following those principles, it's the same everywhere else in the UK, and there's no public nuisance arising from it. The fact that people can hear it, the fact that people may wish to complain about it, the fact that people may not wish that type of music is not lead it to be a public nuisance. It is, am I following established guidance and principles that are adopted throughout the UK to protect the public from public nuisance occurring? Yes, that is what the document sets out there to do.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We'll let you go now to your
Okay,
day.
thank you very much, gents. Ladies.
I've got one more name. That's Mr. Jonathan Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify one point Mr. Jones mentioned. It's the fact that I'm well known for environmental noise assessments and examining noise management plans on behalf of various organisations, including actually environmental health officers, but not Derbyshire Dales environmental health officers. I'm brought in when they are concerned about a noise management plan and want investigating. With regard to my data that I mentioned earlier, all my data, as any person that's involved in measuring or assessing noise, all my data is further checked by a very highly qualified, experienced, full-time acoustic consultant. And he has checked all my figures, all my calculations, and they're exactly correct. That's all I want to say to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. Excuse me. Just before I leave, just want to sort of defend myself here, because that was just coming just over the leave button. So am I correct in thinking that Jonathan Edwards has to put his information through a third party individual
we're not going
and be competent? But I leave it at that for now. I've got to go to another meeting.
Okay. Where are we? Right, no more questions. Any questions from the committee?
I think Mr. Bones got his hand up, Andrew.
Mr. Bones again.
Thank you. I wasn't able to speak when you went on to somebody else.
So sorry, Mr. Bones.
That's all right. I'd just like to. So I've been listening to all the comments, and I have to say, I think the local jobs is a red herring. I think most people would agree with that. Every time I listen to Mr. Edge, he's rowing back on what may be required or may, he talks about parking for 3,500 cars, and in the next sentence he's talking about, well, probably we're only about 1,500 people there. So, the thing keeps changing. He talks about 5 music festivals, and then he's talking about, oh, well, perhaps a farmer's market. Well, probably not many people will complain about a farmer's market, but we're talking about 5 music festivals here and everything that means. And the trouble is, as a resident, if God forbid the licensing committee agrees this, then you've effectively agreed 5 music festivals. Never mind all the red herrings that have been talked about today. So please reject it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Can I address the chair, please?
Pardon, sorry?
It's Simon Gillis. Can I address the chair, please?
Simon?
Gillis.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I've been trying to get some conversation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get a question in, but unfortunately I can't raise my hand within Zoom for some reason. Technology, it's great. So I've got 3 points I just want to raise. I'm not going to discuss them. I think we just need to be aware of it. That Darley Moor Race Circuit, the owners and operators of the facility who have granted the use of the facility to Euphoria Festivals are obliged to annually publish their events. So there is no way that the events, as raised by Audrey, could be potentially pushed out at the last minute. Second point is, I'm really quite curious, and I'm still trying to get an answer for this. The licensing application is specifically dated for the 21st of August, which means I presume you guys are going to go away and agree a license for the 21st of August. But I am quite curious why we have to stipulate there are planned proposed 5 additional events when this is not part of this particular license application. And I would suggest to the licensing committee that if 5 further events are going to take place, that in each and every case they have to go through a licensing approval. And the last point, as the organizer and the person ultimately accountable, Mr. Beresford, he has stated that he has run and operated and supported numerous events. None of them were outside, that he was the organizer of. And none of them, he's not actually given us any quantitative figures related to the number of participants for those events. I do believe that maybe, and it's my own personal opinion, I'll leave it at that, I think maybe he's out of his depth. But he is relying on the responsibility of professional people to support this event, and I accept that. However, all those representatives who have been on this call stand to gain financially from that. So they do have a vested interest, which should have been declared at the beginning of the call. That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Would Rob like to answer that?
Yeah, it looks like I can't see anyone else's hands raised, so it's just checking with the chair, your members and anyone else if they've got any further questions.
Yeah, any members' questions? Arlene, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, if I could, Chair. Firstly, the application, this is really an answer to Mr. Gillis. The application, as we understand it, is that, yes, there's one event proposed for this year, the August one, but that the actual licence application is for up to a maximum of 5 events per year. So there won't be a repeat application. This application is to cover that. I mean, whether the members of the committee decide to grant a licence at all, or grant a licence for up to 5 events, or grant a licence for any number below that's entirely up to them. But that is the application as it stands. The other point I wanted to raise at this moment, and this is going back a little bit to somebody else's questions earlier on, or statements, was that once the license is granted, it's granted, well, I'm going to say forever because I can't say the word in whatever it is. So forever, that's not the case. The license would be granted if one was granted for the life of the business. There are sanctions in place that the Licensing Act allows, and that is that once a license is granted, you're not stuck with it. It can be brought in for review by any of the responsible authorities at any time, usually after the first year, and it can be brought in for review by a member of the public or a group of members of the public or whatever. And if a responsible authority, for example, had tried everything within their own primary powers to control an event, for example, if there were issues with it, then they could resort to review. That review would be advertised by the licensing authority, not the applicant, and anybody else would be able to join in that review during the 28-day consultation period. So all I'm saying is, on the other hand, playing devil's advocate, there are sanctions. It isn't the license is granted forever and we've all, everyone's got to put up with any problems. So the primary legislation would be used by any of the responsible authorities if there were issues after an event, and it's only if those issues couldn't be controlled that way, then an actual review of the license could be made, and the license could be revoked there would be options open to that subcommittee to determine the future of the licence. That's all, Chair.
Very good. Thank you for that, Arlene. Could I ask the applicant if he'd like to sum up, please?
I will indeed. Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. I don't want to go over everything in detail, so I'll do my summing up as a summarise with a list of bullet points, if I may, Chair.
Very good.
All events planned are for one day only. There will be no camping on site or adjacent to the site. Darley Moor Racetrack must be seen as a separate issue with regards to noise issues. The premises licence should be judged on its own merits. A highly skilled professional management team is overseeing the events and will show the necessary due diligence in all matters related to the premises licence. We have liaised extensively with responsible authorities and will continue to do so leading up to the event. We believe this will not only benefit the festival organisers, but also increase the number of visitors to the area who will spend money in the local economy. The festival will bring jobs to local people employed at the events. It will increase footfall to the local area without causing a nuisance factor to the local population. All aspects of the events are being carefully planned and will be well managed. We have agreed amendments to the original application with the police in relation to crime and disorder, and continue to liaise with environmental health in relation to public nuisance. Responsible authorities are happy that this is a good, strong application with robust operating schedules for a premises licence. Otherwise, they would have objected to this application. Throughout the process, we have followed general advice, guidance of the principles by applying and following the Council Statement of Licensing Policy, the Home Office Section 182 guidance, and by continually talking with responsible authorities and other parties. There have been no substantial submissions of evidence presented by those objecting that the licensing objectives will not be upheld by the applicant. I strongly believe this event can and will be an asset to the area in the long term. With a strong management team, robust policies, and ensuring that they uphold and promote the licensing objectives. When we talk about diversification of offer in the nighttime economy, it's essential to ensure that there's an offer for all ages and all tastes. The applicant has invested time, money, and passion to make it successful without compromising on any of the licensing objectives. This has been demonstrated by his willingness to employ the services of consultants to deliver the advice and expertise needed to run an event such as this. The applicant intends to show that it will be a model event run in accordance with the Licensing Act and fully cooperate with responsible authorities moving forward and being accepting of expert advice offered by any of these bodies. It should be noted that there is not a cumulative impact area, cumulative impact zone within this area, and so noise created within this area is outside of the control of the premises license holder, apart from the event. There will be a letter drop with full details sent to all those residents in advance of any function event, and giving contact details numbers for any noise issues. it was interesting to note when I went through again the day before yesterday, the resident objections and looking at some of the emails, that a number of those individuals then emailed me requesting free tickets for the event, and yet still placed in their objections to the application. If the license is granted, an event still needs to meet the requirements of highways licensing and environmental health, and we will continue to work with those to ensure that we meet their thresholds. This concludes my submissions, unless you have any further questions, Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Edge.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just, before we go, could I just go back to Councillor Tony Moore? You had your hand up, Mr. Moore. Councillor
Yes,
Morley.
yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to make the point that I think that comment about free tickets was flippant and not worthy of a conversation like this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Morley. Right, are all members of the committee satisfied with enough information to determine its decision in this case?
Yes, Councillor Mark Wakeman, yes, I've got enough.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got enough as well. Thank you.
Chair,
yes.
Can I just add one thing, because I do believe it should be said in public. I've asked Laura Salmon, our environmental health officer, excuse me a second, just to find it, regarding Mr. Edwards and his qualifications and etc. I just wanted to get her comments as our environmental health officer, and I just want to read her reply. I believe Mr. Edwards has took a noise qualification, unsure of which, on behalf of Williston and Edliston Noise Action Group in relation to noise from bikes on the track. I didn't know that he worked for anyone else in relation to noise. We've never had a reason to doubt his calculations, and I do intend to raise this with the noise consultant. So, Chair, I felt that was needed to be highlighted because, of course, the noise expert raised issues relating to his qualifications and to the readings he has brought. So our noise expert, our environmental health, has no issues with his calculations and intends to raise it. So I just wanted to make that clear. Chair, also, I was going to ask you and the other members how you wish to proceed now that we've finished the hearing. There's been 4 hours or so, well, we started at 9, so there's been, for us, 4 hours worth of hearings and consideration of this matter. If members so wish, we can reserve a decision for 10 working days in which to give us time to fully consider what you've heard. You've got two choices. You could either do that and we can go through it later today, or you can call everyone back and make that determination. But as I say, we've heard 4 hours worth of evidence. Whether or not you feel you would have a reasonable period of time to make a decision this afternoon, I will put that up to you, Chair, and to discuss with your fellow councillors.
Very good. Well, I think we could resign for dinner and come back later on this afternoon. Does that find favour with the rest of the committee?
Yes, it's fine with me.
Fine with me.
Very good. Well, if we can, probably come back at what, 1:45, 1:45. Does that sound all right?
Fine with me. Anytime.
Very good.
Okay with you?
1:30 do me.
1:30. Okay.
Yeah. That'll just be yourselves and us, just for everyone present. That will just be the three councillors, myself, and the committee clerk to take notes, because that's how I consider our decision. Chair, as I say, I think it might be difficult to have everyone hanging around for a final decision. Do we want to give the decision then in written format rather than try and convene a hearing and get everyone back in?
That's probably wisely.
Yeah.
We'll make the decision, then post it out.
as I say, Chair, under section 26 of the hearing regulations, it does give us 10 working days in which to give a decision. I just think logistically wise, with a lot of people listening and a large number of people, to try and then arrange a time to get everyone back in when we may or may not have made a final decision, may be a bit complicated. Thank you, Chair.
That sounds good.
Chair, Chair, could we ask if that is made electronically, that decision, the letter? You say a letter, I assume you meant electronically by email?
I will draft up, I will take away with the comments, I will draft up a reasoned decision, which usually is then emailed out to all parties involved.
Thank you.
Can I confirm with Mr. Gardner, did you say 7 working days?
10. My understanding it's 10 under the section 26.
Oh, I was always under the impression it was 7, but I'll beg you.
Well, see, looking, hold it a second, let me just pull it. Let's see if I've got it here. Sorry?
Sections, what are you on the determination section?
Right, I apologise if I've got this wrong. I was looking at, let me just find it. No, section 17 is asking questions. I think it's section 26. I'm just trying to get my way back to the actual regulations. (26) Determinant of applications. So in this, a case where a hearing's been heard, etc., applications, then you got a number that have to be received in 5 working days.
Yeah, so it's 5 working days or 7 days.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and get the decision out in 5 working days anyway. So if we work on that basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. So we'll now retire to make our decision. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming and speaking, and I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.